Good evening and welcome to Student Media's live 2014 election coverage. My name is Sean Pagley and I'm the General Manager at WGMU Radio. Joined with me are my co-hosts Hao Chu, the Editor-in-Chief of Fourth Estate, Alexa Rogers, the News Editor of Fourth Estate, and John Hill, the host of WGMU's Take It to the Hill. This evening we'll take you through a host of election results and analyze those results, as well as have discussions on topics that matter to students most. Our first topic this evening is the Virginia Senate race. The race concludes today, obviously, but Mark Warner is the favorite to win against Republican Ed Gillespie. What are your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, I think this is in a year where there's a ton of toss-ups and a bunch of swing states. I think Virginia, this one is a safe win for Mark Warner this year. And from our exit polling, we're seeing that that's pretty much the case.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to agree. I think, with a lot of states that could possibly swing one direction or the other, where we might be, the Democrats might be losing the control of the Senate.
Yes.
I think it's definitely a year where it's a safe bet for Virginia's keeping Mark Warner.
You say Mark Warner's the favorite, but he's definitely not my favorite for this election. And 7 out of 10 Americans are upset with the direction the country's headed, and over half of Americans are upset with President Obama's performance and his position. And I think Virginians feel the same way across the board with Americans. I think that's going to hurt Mark Warner in this election. I think Gillespie has a good chance of pulling off an upset in this one. And if there is an upset, it will be Virginia.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a very close election. It really all depends on the turnout, and obviously we're going to get into that a little bit more. So now let's discuss the candidates. What are Mark Warner's views and Ed Gillespie's views?
I mean, what is there to say? I feel like Mark Warner is a beloved son of Virginia. He, on paper, theoretically, Mark Warner is like the candidate you would want. She's shown his record as Virginia State Governor that he's willing to work with the Republicans. He was one of the most popular governors when he left Richmond. Compared to Ed Gillespie, who's basically a PR man who decided that he wanted to run for Senate one day, and he has no credentials whatsoever in the legislative sense. He was at best an advisor to George W. Bush. In fact, Ed Gillespie is one of the main reasons that politics, as it stands today, is a bad thing, because he's one of the co-founders of American Crossroads GPS, the big super PAC with Karl Rove that was at the heart of the super PAC debate of Citizens United.
That is true. I would say that Gillespie is definitely a good candidate to run against Warner. Obviously, the race started with Warner being up 30 points. Anytime you're down 30 points to a candidate starting an election, it's obviously not a good start. I'd say that seeing the gap close to single digits in the past few weeks has been interesting. I think if Gillespie had another week in the election cycle, he may have been able to pull it off. I do think it will end up being Mark Warner tonight, obviously. I wouldn't say Mark Warner is willing to work with Republicans, because he does vote with Obama 97% of the time. He is a beloved son of Virginia, though. However, his favorability fell below 50% in the Commonwealth for the first time in his political history. So I think that's showing of the overall national sentiment against President Obama. He may be, people may like him still, but, their favorability of him is going to go lower, obviously, as the president's dragging him down. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that his favorability's dropped. He's voted for nearly $1 trillion in new taxes and $7 trillion in new debt. And if you look at Mark Warner, the man, down to the core, and how he values Virginians' taxpayer money, he flies around on the taxpayer dime in luxury travel, luxury private flights. Look at Tim Kaine, his Democratic counterpart in the Senate here in Virginia. He drives around. That's the way it should be done when you're working for the people. He flies around in luxury flights, but let's look at where he's spending that taxpayer money. He doesn't even spend it on a Virginia company. That's our taxpayer money. You think as a Virginia senator, he spent it on a Virginia company. There's plenty of options for that kind of travel here in Virginia. He spends it on a company called Zen Air LLC, located in who knows where, but it's not Virginia, I'll tell you that. So, I mean, It doesn't surprise me that his favorability is low, and that's why I think there could be an upset here in Virginia.
I just like the stat that Republicans like to throw around voting with Obama 97% of the time. It's actually most of those are just a lot of procedural votes that aren't really meaningful. Yes, they're they're like the tax votes. But the one thing you can say positive about Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader, is that to try to win re-election in 2010 and 2012, he's tried to minimize as many votes as possible, because he knows that the swell is that Obama's losing support. So any votes, any stat you hear from Republican candidates that say voted with Obama 97% of the time, 99% of the time, it's a really misleading stat. that, in that it's just these standard procedural votes that are a lot of times just like meaningless.
My favorite one is the one where they claim that President Obama, is deciding to go ahead, obviously, with amnesty, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. There's not going to be a vote on that, so the voting record really doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry Reid changed the procedures of the Senate so that there really wouldn't be votes. So, I mean, you may be talking 20-something votes here, but obviously percentage sounds fancy. So, what do you think, Alexa?
I don't know. I mean, I think that, like we said earlier, that, Warner is more of a viable candidate. I think some of the things that you're bringing to the table are really interesting, but I don't know. I think one of the more things I kind of want to segue into would be like looking into kind of healthcare. What do you think?
To where they stand, sure.
Yeah.
Right on healthcare? Yeah.
I think Mark Warner's where he stands on the issue is basically, I would agree that they're basically at this point mainstream party line Democrat views. But I think you hear all the rumors from just like inside Washington that Mark Warner is not one of the favorite senators at all of Harry Reid, because he's working on the student debt bill currently with Marco Rubio, and basically it's a sin to work with anyone affiliated with the Tea Party if you're a part of the Democratic Party.
Right.
So he doesn't get obviously like the most favorable like committee assignments. He's not like, but from working with people like Marco Rubio, you can tell that he is pragmatic in a way.
And on healthcare, I'd like to quote Senator Warner real quick. He said, quote, "I'm not going to support a healthcare reform plan that's going to take away healthcare that you've got right now, or a healthcare plan that you like." I will leave that to everybody at home to Google what happened, and you'll find that a lot of people lost the healthcare that they have right now, and a lot of people lost the healthcare that they like. So he broke that promise by voting for Obamacare. And I don't think voters, especially in Virginia, like a dishonest politician. Of course, all politicians are dishonest. But what's the way to change that? Tell them that's wrong, no matter who they are, whether they're in the party you like or not, and vote them out. Get somebody else in. If they lie, vote them out. Get somebody else in. You got to break the chain somewhere. So.
Right. I think once the GOP does take control of the Senate, you'll probably see that bill come up for a vote. And if it does pass, then, that's great for Senator Warner. I think he should be doing stuff like that. He runs a lot on supporting students and education and funding, and obviously we'll get into that a little bit more in depth. But, hopefully it does end up passing, because we're being crushed under the debt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think we're kind of all dancing around Obamacare and just kind of how, how it certainly has some issues, and I'm sure you're both waiting for, GOP to take the Senate and try to repeal it. And,
it's obviously that's not going to happen, but...
Try.
Yeah, we could try.
Try.
We've already
Okay.
passed that
So,
a bunch of times.
Yes, try. And, I think that, I don't see it happening, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that winds up.
Yeah, and I agree with
majority.
your criticisms that maybe if the Republicans ran any other literally any other candidate besides Ed Gillespie, someone who has proven himself to not have any sort of credentials to be in any legislative position,
Right.
that this would be a lot more competitive race because there are so many issues, because you can see how fractured Virginia has become, that it's obviously been fractured into Northern Virginia and the rest of Virginia, where Northern Virginia
Absolutely.
is the large base of Democratic support, and then you can tell rural areas of Virginia are more likely to support a Republican candidate because of just single issue votes.
Right. Yeah, once we start getting some results from Virginia tonight, you're going to see a lot of Republican districts coming in from out west in the Shenandoah Valley and rural Virginia. And that's going to show a heavy Gillespie lead out front, and then that's slowly going to evaporate once Northern Virginia starts to come fill in, especially Fairfax County. I also think Robert Sarvis is playing a key role in this election.
Yeah.
As he did last year in the gubernatorial.
For sure.
He's taking away, a sizable percent. When you're talking 3-4%, that could, potentially swing a vote. But I want to dive into our exit poll that student media conducted today at the University Polling Precinct up at Merton Hall. We polled a sum of 123 students, which was about a quarter of the total vote had at Merton Hall. The turnout at that polling location was about 11% last time it was checked. So I think it's going to show a debate coming on whether or not the polling place should be on campus. And we'll be talking politics on campus. But the breakdown of votes was 65% for Mark Warner, so 81 votes, 34 votes for Ed Gillespie at 27.6%, and 8 votes for Robert Sarvis at about 6.5%. So what do you take away from that? Obviously, student support of Mark Warner is still there. The turnout necessarily isn't there for him because students aren't, excited to vote in this midterm election. But what do you see coming away from that?
I think it's a very standard exit poll, what you'd expect from a college campus, that it's the youth vote really got out for Mark Warner, and then just the small support that Robert Sarvis got is also indicative of what the youth is interested in. That we also did an exit poll. On the same exit poll, we also asked those who voted what was the most important issue for them when they voted, and 45 of the 81 who voted for Mark Warner said social issues was the #1 thing. And that is, again, something you would expect from college students, that they would vote primarily for social issues, and that social issues drives a lot of voting because liberal-leaning social views are more in line with that of college students, I think.
Yeah.
Alexa.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you look at the numbers on, at Gillespie, only 2% said they came out for social issues. So I think it's definitely something.
Yeah, 73% of his voters were economy, and
exactly.
55% of Warner's voters were social issues.
And a major concern, too, of college voters, what I think it should be, is debt, because we're the ones who are inheriting this national debt that our country has to deal with. And I think that's one of the attractive points, too, as we see not so popular with college students, but Ed Gillespie's support for the balanced budget amendment, not spending more than the government brings in. That's something Mark Warner clearly doesn't support with his numerous votes for an increase in the debt ceiling and such.
Yeah, approaching $18 trillion of debt. Now, I'm not sure if we've eclipsed that yet. I know it was supposed to happen sometime this week. But it's definitely an issue that young voters should be concerned with. When I hear young people say, I don't want to go to the polls, I don't want to vote, you should be voting because you're electing the politicians who decide what's spent, what it's appropriated on, and this is stuff that we're going to be paying back in the future if the debt's ever repaid. It's almost $180,000 per taxpayer at this point, so it's definitely a big problem, and I hope to see Mark Warner, if he is reelected to the Senate, take a little bit more of a fiscal conservative approach on not rubber stamping things through and wasting all kinds of federal money, especially $30,000 on Starbucks like it was exposed this week.
And if you look at the impact that these senators are going to have on these issues, are they going to have more of an impact on social issues, or are they going to have more of an impact on economic issues and national debt issues? It's clearly going to be on the economic and national debt issues, considering social issues, especially nowadays, seem to be a lot with the courts. And so
I like the points brought up by John and Storm. They're more concerned about these private air travel, the Starbucks that Mark Warner's expensing, but what they're failing to mention is where Ed Gillespie's getting his money. And that's obviously, and like I said before, Ed Gillespie is one of the reasons why everyone's having these crises of where are all these candidates getting their money, where are these pourings of just like unlimited spending coming in, and a lot of it has to do with the policy set up by Ed Gillespie and what his track record is.
Yeah, but if you look at where Ed Gillespie's getting his money, he's getting money voluntarily. Mark Warner is getting money from Virginians involuntarily, and he's spending it on things like private luxury travel. There's a big difference between voluntarily giving somebody money and being taxed.
Well, Mark Warner also has his own personal wealth. He's obviously a very accomplished businessman. He ran time.
But all the private flights and all that was paid with. He has his personal wealth. He could use that. He could use his own money to do that luxury travel, but instead he chooses to use taxpayer money that could be going towards education, could be going towards the national debt. He uses taxpayer money to fly around in these this luxury flight. So it's a difference, I think.
I think we'd agree that no politician should be doing that with taxpayer dollars.
Absolutely.
But
and full disclosure, there are Republicans in other areas of the country that do that as well.
Absolutely.
And Democrats too.
I'm sure Mitch McConnell takes luxury flights all the time.
And like I said, you want to bring something up? You're pointing out.
Oh, no. I also think it's interesting to look at our, voter demographic as well in terms of, how many, just how many people came out. And it seems to be that, definitely white majority came out for Gillespie, which is expected. And I think, looking at voter turnout, according to Pew, 70% of non-voters in midterm elections are under the age of 50, which young voters were definitely on the the lower part of that, but, and they're not as racially diverse. And I think that's, it's definitely evident in our demographic polling numbers here.
Oh, absolutely. And the gender breakdown was pretty similar. Warner had about 50% female, and Gillespie had 44% female. So it was not too much of a breakdown there. I think it's also interesting to look at the Obama job approval
Absolutely.
of these votes. And if you look at Warner, 85% of his votes cast in this exit poll do approve of the job that Barack Obama is doing as president, which obviously falls in line with what they've been running on. This election hasn't really been a Republican platform election. It's been an anti-Obama election.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see, what the legislative agenda is. And all
That's
midterms, always the president's party loses seats in a midterm election. There's only been 3 times that hasn't happened. It's obviously bound to happen. It's just a matter of how much and how far it goes here to see if this is a true wave election or to see if it's just a matter of, an in-between.
Just either it's a candidate versus a candidate.
Right. And in the Gillespie portion, the Obama job approval is 2.9%. 2.9%. That was one voter of his was approving of Obama's job, and 33 disapproved of the job.
Can we interview that person?
If you are that outlier, let us know.
That one outlier was the only person there that voted for Jerry Connolly. We'll be talking about the congressional district 11 race later, but it seemed like that one person maybe marked the wrong thing. Or maybe not, if that's you.
That's for sure. All right, well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more live coverage from student media on this election night in 2014. And we're looking forward to analyzing more of the results as they start to come in. The first major polls will be closing in about 13 minutes, and the polls here in Virginia will be as well. We'll be right back.
WGMU Radio and WGMUradio.com. Welcome to a special edition of the First Pick. You will read. Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. Appreciate it. I'm Ben Simpson. On the phone today, we have Drew. How are you doing today, Drew? I mean, your name. Kind of what made you decide to write a book about them?
It wasn't my...
You're out in Maryland, right?
I am. I used to work with George Mason people that way.
Promote the book as much as possible. We're here around campus.
Thanks, dude.
All right, have a great one. You will read. Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. Appreciate it. You're listening to WGMU Radio on WGMUradio.com.
Thinking of studying abroad? Consider spending a semester at Mason's new campus in Korea. Enjoy a unique experience where you will be taught by main campus faculty and will learn about one of the most important regions in the world. Students pay the same tuition as they do on main campus, and housing costs significantly less. Join the Office of Global Strategy each Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. in the Johnson Center Gold Room for an information session, or visit masonglobal.gmu.edu to learn more.
Welcome back to Student Media's live election coverage here on this 2014 election night. We're going to dive right in now to the congressional races in this area. We're going to start off with Congressional District 11, which features a race between incumbent Democrat Jerry Connolly and Republican Suzanne Scholte. So what are your thoughts on the races? I think it was definitely a race that was once in the safe column for the Democrats. It wasn't even thought of. No money was being spent. And then all of a sudden, Connolly started putting ads on TV and starting to raise money. So I think it showed that the race was dramatically tightening at the end. What do you see as going forward?
No, yeah, I definitely thought that was interesting that I saw any Connolly ads whatsoever,
Yeah.
because it seemed like that the Democratic Party was just going to funnel their money somewhere else.
Right.
But I think it's but I think it's interesting that that it would suggest that potentially Connolly or Scholte had some internal polling numbers that were saying that it wasn't as safe as they thought. But I still feel that, because I feel like this is the exact same race as the Senate.
Yep.
The same issues could be brought up in this race as you could about the Senate race. You have Jerry Connolly, someone who took the path of very successful politicians, someone Republicans obviously respect, like Tom Davis, where
Right.
his ascent into power was from the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. He chaired that, and then now he's our congressman. Versus Suzanne Scholte, who again has no prior legislative experience. She's obviously done great work, humanitarian work, helping refugees from North Korea. But again, it's just the opposition of who has experience and who has the credibility to run.
I would agree 100%. I think it's exactly the race. If we had one more week, Scholte may be able to pull off an upset here as well. I think it's going to be interesting to see, like we said, the Nova turnout. If the Democrats came to vote today, then he'll cruise to easy election. If not, it may be closer. There was a decent amount of Scholte votes in the exit poll. It was just about in line with the university voting split between Warner and Gillespie. So I'm going to be interested to see once those results start coming in where Connolly is going to be performing and underperforming.
Yeah, I mean, I'd want to ask though, what do you think as a candidate she would bring to the table? Do you think that maybe they're just kind of here, or maybe just voting a straight ticket?
No, I mean I think she's got an impressive background. Connolly really hasn't done anything as the congressman for this district. He's been there since 2009. He hasn't passed any major legislation on his own. He's been sort of an impedance on the committees that he's on. He never really attends committee meetings. That's not really a surprise, though. A lot of congressmen do that. But I think she's got a very, very impressive resume that, probably could go neck and neck with his. He's been in Congress for a few years, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're qualified for anything. John?
Right. I think part of what makes her an attractive candidate is that she isn't this Washington insider. He was speaking of her resume. If anybody goes to her website, SuzanneSchulteForCongress.com, and you read about her, it could take us another 30 minutes to read through her whole resume, pointing on a couple of them being the President's Volunteer Service Award, a gold one presented this year by President Barack Obama, honoring volunteers that set a standard for service. She's got the Sanders Peace and Social Justice Award. There's a whole bunch of other lists of awards, but positions she's held. She's a president of the Defense Forum Foundation since 1988, chairman and founding member of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, board of director, or executive committee of the Susan B. Anthony list. She's got a really impressive resume that isn't an inside Washington resume like Jerry Connolly. And I think, again, with that CNN poll saying that 7 out of 10 Americans are upset with the direction of the country, I think that includes Jerry Connolly, and I think it's time to get some people from outside Washington in Washington and get a little mix up there with players.
I just think it's interesting. I mean, Jerry Connolly, obviously not too inside Washington, given that he's only served since 2009,
Right.
And he's obviously shown more of his community credentials, like I said, serving on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors.
Yep.
But I also think, just going back to the thing you were just talking about, how he's been an impedance in his committees. I think what you really mean to say is just he's stood up to Darrell Issa, who's a noted terrible person, but
Darrell Issa is investigating several scandals that should be investigated and haven't
what
been.
happened in Benghazi?
Yeah, exactly. What happened
Yes.
in Benghazi? What's going on with the IRS scandal? There's plenty of things that President Obama's been given a free pass on, and it's time for that to come to an end. And when the GOP takes back the Senate tonight, there's going to be full investigations, and you're going to see a lot of this stuff come out in the last 2 years of this administration. I think it's fair to say Obama's done worse things than President Nixon ever did, and he resigned
Very
over
true.
it. So
It's-
I think, him impeding investigations on Benghazi, and that's why a select committee was formed. So I think you're going to see Trey Gowdy really uncover some interesting stuff there, and it's going to affect Hillary in 2016 as well. But, it's obviously back and forth political party debate here, whether it's a scandal or not a scandal. So did you have anything else to add on that race?
I think we should go to
Congressional
go to the-
District 10.
yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to Congressional District 10 now. We have a race. It's an open seat running after the retirement of Congressman Frank Wolf, longtime congressman for the area. It's Barbara Comstock, who's the Republican, against John Foist, who's the Democrat. It's been an interesting race. A lot of money has been put into that race, especially by the Republicans. So what do you see coming of that? I think we're going to see a Comstock win tonight. But
I think Comstock will slide in with the victory easily because based on just her credentials, she's been a state delegate, but then also because Foist isn't necessarily a strong candidate. I would say, I mean, obviously, if I were in that district, I would still vote for Foist just on a party ticket. But I would say that Comstock's resume in the Virginia State House is spotty at best, just because of because of some of the votes she did. She voted for the very controversial transvaginal ultrasound bill that McDonnell was trying to get passed through. That would require women who want an abortion to get a transvaginal ultrasound and take a look at it before they were going through with the process.
Obviously ridiculous, but
Absolutely.
I mean, I think Faust's fatal mistake in this campaign was his statement as a male towards Barbara Comstock as a mother. I don't think she's even had a real job. He said that. He said that statement about her. And I know Democrats always talk about this war on woman from the Republicans, but look, this is a male Democrat saying, I don't think she's even had a real job, to a Republican female candidate. She's a mother, and if you look at her resume after that as a lawyer, as a legislative aide, as a delegate, she was a babysitter actually when she was working her way through the law school. She's done a lot more. She's done a lot, and she's a mother to begin with. If you don't count that as a job, if Faust doesn't count that as a job, there's plenty of other on her resume. I think that was a fatal mistake by Faust.
I've always been very intrigued by the supposed war on women by Republicans, because you could look at the other side and make the case just as easily. So,
please make it.
Well, so for example, you have a candidate in South Carolina in the governor's race who called Nikki Haley a whore, and he smiled about it live on camera. And the media obviously is not going to beat him up for that because they're on Obama's lap. It's just time after time the media is driving home this idea because it's an election-winning issue for Democrats. They drive home this idea. Obama ran on it exclusively in 2012 in Northern Virginia as the war on women. It's this election-winning issue for them that's driven home by the media, always the war on women, the war on women, the war on women. You could look at other examples and say the other side is just as bad.
And the most humorous part is when you have a lot of male candidates, especially in this election, male Democrats telling Republican women that they're waging a war on women. These women are waging a war on themselves? That rhetoric doesn't work anymore.
Did you see the senator who's retiring in Iowa, Chuck Grassley, what he said about Joni Ernst?
No,
it was
Tom Harkin said that.
Tom Harkin, yeah, not Chuck Grassley. He said something along the lines of, she's Taylor Swift and not qualified for this job. It's just as bad on the other side. So, any other analysis on the race? Obviously, we took a little tangent there on the war on women, but yeah.
No, I mean, I would just counter just quickly because we'll touch on it in domestic issues. But I do think that the Republican war on women is a very real thing. That it's not just like a media-driven narrative. That you can just tell from the actions. You can tell from various bills that are something as simple as the Fair Pay Act, something as basic on the table. Just this is what it is. This is exactly. We just want equality for men and women, and then you just saw Republicans just go with a party line vote and just grout about it all the time. Right. And then it just elects a judge.
I mean, I think when you're talking about the transvaginal, that's definitely something. I think as a female, it's a surprise to see to see another female kind of vote that way. But people have different ideas about what they think is right.
I mean, that idea is obviously ridiculous, but
and
yet
somehow, exactly,
it,
and yet somehow some people think think it's a good idea. But I have to agree with Hal here. I do think it's a very real thing that it does toe the party line, and I'm not going to say it's even on both sides because obviously it's going to come from the other party as well. I always think that'll be a women's issue topic that we can get to later. But
yeah, we're going to talk about it more in domestic issues. So I think we're going to see Comstock victory tonight in that district, and a Connolly victory. Which is terrible, but a Connolly victory in Congressional District 11. So now we are going to go to commercial real quick. When we come back, we're going to discuss some Virginia other races around the Commonwealth. And now it is 7 p.m. and the polls in Virginia have closed, so we should slowly start getting some results, especially from the more rural areas of the Commonwealth. So keep it tuned here to Student Media's live election coverage on Election Night 2014. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Student Media's live election coverage, brought to you by WGMU 4th Estate, Mason Cable Network, and Mason Votes. Joined with me are my co-hosts Hao Chu, Alexa Rogers, and John Hill. So now we're going to dive into a little bit of election result analysis and talk about some of the races that the polls just closed.
Just chiming in on that right now.
Yeah, McConnell wins Kentucky as GOP bid for Senate majority, according to the Associated Press.
Yeah. So we can call that as one of the that was one of the, I believe, 9 battleground states in the Senate that they were looking at. It was Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, or Senate Minority Leader, becoming Senate Majority Leader, taking on Allison Lundergan Grimes.
Yeah.
Allison Lundergan Grimes, who was, I believe, Kentucky's Attorney General or something like that.
Yeah, she was definitely a good candidate to run against him, honestly. The Democrats unified behind her. The reason they called the race so early, they only have 6% in, is because in the eastern part of the state, in the Louisville area, is traditionally more Democratic, and he's currently pulling 56% from that region. So it's obvious that he's going to have a pretty resounding victory there, especially it just increased to 57% now. So it should be interesting to see once he gets the west part of the state in there, he may get close to 58 to 60% of that vote. That'd be pretty resounding.
No, and I think that is indicative of, like we were talking about before, of Obama's job approval. Yeah. That Allison Lundergan Grimes was basically an ideal candidate you could send out in somewhere like Kentucky. She's obviously a woman, and you would get out the woman vote of Democrats, but she's also a card-carrying member of the NRA. I think she had a great quote where she was just like, Mitch McConnell doesn't own any guns. I'd like to take him out shooting ones to show him what's what. But I think if there was any candidate who could have even put up a battle to McConnell, Lundergan Grimes was a pretty solid candidate, but then she ran into her own issues, like internally with within the Democratic Party in Kentucky, where she just would never reveal who she voted for in 2008, 2012.
That became an issue for a few Senate candidates. They wouldn't. It just all they had to say was they voted for Obama. Everybody knows. It's just. So let's talk about a few races that are key that closed at the 7 o'clock time. We have the Florida governor's race between Rick Scott and Charlie Crist. That's actually a very interesting race. I think that you probably will see Scott pull it out, but I could easily see Crist, coming in there and taking it.
I think Charlie Crist will win that, honestly.
You think so?
I think just with the recent negativity around Rick Scott, with the whole debacle with the fan debate where Rick Scott refused to come out to the podium and debate Charlie Crist because Charlie Crist had a fan underneath his podium. And also just past governor, not past governor history, but like past legislative history, where Rick Scott has just proven to be an ineffective leader of Florida, and Charlie Crist, I think, former governor of Florida, will take that seat back.
Well, he changed parties, which I never liked that. But I think that fan issue was valid though, because he was breaking the rules of the debate. It's a matter of principle. But moving on.
Moving on.
In Georgia, you see the Georgia Senate race between Perdue and Nunn, and then also the Georgia governor race between Deal and Carter. It's going to be interesting to see, if you get any split ticket voting there.
Yeah, for sure.
Most pundits think that Deal will be able to hold on to the governor's seat with more than 50% and avoid a runoff, but he may need to as well. Interestingly, they do 2 separate runoffs. They do a governor's runoff in December and then a Senate runoff in January.
And just to add on Soren's point, the reason that there could potentially be split ticketing is because in the Senate race, the Republican candidate is David Perdue, but the Democratic candidate is Michelle Nunn, and Michelle Nunn is the daughter of a very famous Georgia politician, Sam Nunn, who was a very popular senator in his time and was really a bipartisan senator and was able to get support from both parties, and that's why Storm mentioned that there would be potentially ticket splitting on that issue, and that's why Michelle Nunn is running so close, and that's why they're projecting a potential runoff between the two. Yeah. But I was also seeing in recent polls that just as soon as yesterday is that Michelle Nunn was not looking good, and even in her internal polls, and that she could struggle to withhold Perdue getting to that 50% threshold.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he does get the 50%, because most of the people have been predicting the runoff for quite some time now, but it'll be interesting to see if we get that tonight. And then moving along, obviously Virginia closed at 7. We already talked about those races. In just about 20 minutes or so at 7:30, you'll see North Carolina close, which is a race between Kay Hagan and Tom Tillis. It's actually one of my most interested races. Yeah, it's going to be real tight. I think once you see that start to come in, if if Tillis is having a great night, I think overall across the nation it'll be a great night for Republicans. But if Hagan's holding in there tight, which I think she's going to, that could show it's going to be a little bit less of a wave than people think.
And I think North Carolina is the most analogous state to Virginia. It's definitely the most interesting state to watch because I feel like we share such similar demographic qualities and voting turnout qualities. In that 2008 was the first time North Carolina went to a Democrat since 1976, since the election of Jimmy Carter, and
then went back.
Romney. And then went back to Romney, right? And then Kay Hagan, of course, got elected in 2008 because she served out 6 terms, and she rode in sort of on the presidential coattails.
Right.
But then now, of course, she wants nothing to do with Obama because of the general support. But I think it's definitely interesting because of the way North Carolina is spread out, like Virginia, where there are large swaths of rural areas, but then there are these central urban locations that are just growing constantly with more young voters, more Democratic voters, more liberal voters.
Right. What do you think, John?
Actually, I agree. I think North Carolina's election is going to be an interesting one, and I actually do think the Democrats, based on the polling data on the North Carolina one, will win that one, but I still think a Republican is going to be overall victorious in taking back the Senate.
Right, I think it's going to be tight, and there's been a push here at the end by Tillis to try to get in there, but she's Kay Hagan's still polling. The last time I checked at 70%.
Yep.
So
Democrats poured tons of money into that race.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That was their heaviest spending race
financial,
because that was the one that they thought they could keep, and New Hampshire as well. And we'll go on to that in a little bit. That's actually, I think, is more likely to maybe go GOP than North Carolina, because you had 2 polls come out within the past 2 days. One showed Shaheen up 1, and one showed Brown up 1. So it's honestly a true toss-up. All comes down to turnout. Obamacare is massively unpopular in New Hampshire, so that'll be an interesting race to watch. Any other races that you guys are specifically watching besides the one that we've gone over already?
No, I think you covered them all.
Yeah, another at 7:30, another interesting race. It's obviously going to go Republican, but I find it interesting is that West Virginia is going to elect a statewide Republican to Senate for the first time since 1958, I believe it was, that Tom Davis threw that number at us. And he thinks that's very interesting, and it's all energy policy.
For sure.
That's what's driving that, is all energy
Coal
policy.
country.
The coal, yeah, exactly. And that drove a lot of Kentucky's vote as well.
Exactly, yeah. But I think, I mean, obviously the West Virginia is a unique case because, like, obviously that stat is kind of crazy that they haven't elected a Republican in 1958. But of course, West Virginia saw the crazy long duration of Senator Robert Byrd, now deceased, and he was one of the longest serving members of the Senate of the entire Congress for a while. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting because I think just as even in the last election in 2012, I believe, where Joe Manchin postured himself, where originally he was like a Democrat, but then obviously he's posturing himself as like this like pragmatist who is working for interest of West Virginia, but then also trying to set his own agenda. But I think the way the tide's been turning, West Virginia has been going solidly Republican recently.
And there's 2 interesting congressional races there as well. One moved from Maryland to West Virginia just across the border to run in that seat because he knew it was going to be empty. Republicans have dumped a lot of money into there, so that's one of the House seats that the Republicans are looking to pick up this evening. So now we're going to take a quick commercial break and then come back and discuss President Obama's overall job performance and how that's contributing to the so-called 6-year itch that always, the 6-year midterm, the president usually gets beat up pretty good, and why midterms matter. So keep it tuned here to Student Media's live election coverage, 2014, Tuesday, November 4th. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Student Media's live election coverage on this election in 2014, the second midterm of President Obama's presidency. So now we're gonna jump into the topic of his presidency and what we think's going on and the direction of the country and how it relates to this year's midterm elections, because it has become the centerpiece of the Republican campaign. So how do you want to start off?
Yeah, I think we mentioned before that midterm elections are always a presidential referendum, and every past midterm election dating back until, gosh, was it 2002 was the last Senate election where the incumbent party held the Senate, but it's always a presidential referendum because there's always like the media coverage of like what the president has been doing wrong, and there's the same way during Obama's presidency, during Bush's presidency, every decision is heightened and magnified in such a way where there's just like a general disapproval of the country. So it's also, I think also midterm elections are always an interesting case study in like a government theory of the checks and balances. You never want one party just completely dominating and forcing what they want out there. You always want to check and balance that the presidency with the people you directly elect of representatives, senators, and stuff. And I think you see that in electoral history proves that.
You mean like the Democrats railroaded Obamacare in 2009?
That's true. He had everything he could have wanted. A House and a Senate, and what did he do? The only thing he did was Obamacare, and people are regretting that now.
Stimulus bill, too.
Well, yeah.
Well, that didn't work either.
Agrees
so
that was basically a failure because we've had to do quantitative easing now for the longest time. I
would argue that the stimulus bill was effective in getting us out of. I think that's an underrated part of Obama's presidency, is that he's been able to get us out of this economic malaise that he's not given full credit for, which I believe he doesn't deserve complete entire credit for. But I think he deserves some partial credit for enforcing the stimulus bill, for his economic policies, for his leadership, for anything, because
lack of leadership.
Let's judge him for let's judge him on some of his own standards. And one of the things that I noticed most, I went to one of President Obama's campaign rallies in 2012, and I know he pushed this issue as well in 2008, is how he continuously talked about how he wanted to fight for the middle class, fight for the middle class. I was just reading an article today on Forbes.com that was talking about, well, real median family income has been in a continuous downward spiral since he became president, actually falling more since the recession ended in the summer of 2009, and that's according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. And that has added up by now to the middle class losing a month's pay a year under President Obama's economic policies. I would by no means call that an economic success. We could also talk about the 47 million Americans who are living on food stamps now, a huge increase under him. And we could also talk about how more people than ever have been dropping out of the labor market since he's become president, and that contributes to the falling unemployment number. And also that falling unemployment number also can be contributed to the fact that we just got out of recession. That's a natural bounce back that you see anywhere in history after a recession. So I wouldn't give President Obama any credit for any of his economic policies. That's
the motto of the GOP party.
Yeah. What do you think,
Yeah,
Alexa?
absolutely. I mean, I think it, like you mentioned, it's natural to see that kind of change in unemployment numbers. But I mean, we're calling back from, we were at 10% in 2009. We're moving back to 6. I mean, you look at a country like Europe; they're still in the double-digit numbers. So I think I have to agree more with Howe here on saying that it's not everything's perfect here, but I don't think Obama's getting as much credit as he deserves on some of these policies.
Right. Well, Europe's unemployment numbers are because they report the actual number. They report the U6 unemployment that takes into account all those that have dropped out of the labor force. And if you look at the U6 unemployment here in our country, it's 12.6%. That's ridiculously high. You should be getting that number below 10% if we're talking about a real economic recovery here. And when you have growth rates of the GDP every quarter that are no greater than 2%, that's no recovery. Ronald Reagan's recovery growth rates were 6 to 8% for two consecutive quarters. So I think, people give him, you say he doesn't get enough credit. I say they give him too much credit for what he's done. His failed policies, his regulatory policies, his taxing policies have done nothing but hurt business in this country and cause job loss. If you want to look at job creation, Texas has created more jobs than across the entire United States in the past 6 years.
Under which governor?
Well, under Rick Perry as governor. Yeah. Not that I'm a huge Rick Perry fan. I do like what he does at the border, but that's about it. But the average Senate loss in a 6th year is 6 seats. How ironic. Only 3 times, like we said, has the president's party held at the midterms. One of those was in 2002 when it was right after 9/11. People's national security was like the lone topic of that election that year. And Tom Davis successfully ran the Republican campaign committee to keep those seats. So that was pretty impressive. But Obama's 39% approval rating isn't just because people obviously are unhappy with his policies. That's not the direction that they want this country to go in. 78% of people think the country's going in the wrong direction. I'm one of those people. I don't think that these policies that we've had over the past 6 years have helped the country at all. And I think that once the GOP takes over the Senate, it's going to be very interesting to see what they start passing and what President Obama vetoes, because now they may be able to successfully turn him into the party of no, because the Republicans are always the party of no, we don't want anything. Well, we're opposing the policies for good reason. But, people tout the economy is better. I don't think it's any better. Like John said, take-home pay is way down. Household income is way down. House prices are way up, but mortgage applications are way down because nobody has the money to afford those homes, which I don't understand. How house prices are rising like that while the mortgage applications are going down. That'd be something to ask, an econ professor. But, I think the superficial numbers that the Obama administration likes to tout out there, they're false. They're just completely false.
And ask an economist about it too. Ask any GMU economics professor here at Mason, and you'll learn a lot more about those.
Well, yeah, our econ department obviously is very conservative.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
For you.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're touching on a lot of things about why, why it's important to be voting in the midterms.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, our voter turnout's at 11% here, which, like we were saying, that's typical for a college campus. Young voters aren't, don't have the biggest voter turnout of, in general for midterm elections like these. But, I think it's important that people, regardless of what side issue they're on, it's important that they're coming out to support these issues, because it will dictate, the next 2 years of Obama's presidency.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about next and why midterms matter. First, we're going to take a quick look at a clip here that we have of an interview of why midterms matter, and it's done by a student government senator, Sam Carpenter. So let's take a look.
Quite frankly, the biggest issue facing the United States of America today is voter participation. If you had every single person in the United States vote for what they thought was best for the country, you'd see a very dramatic political change, because at the end of the day, the individual candidates who get elected are candidates who appeal to the masses, and I think it's essential that students vote and participate. If you take a second to think about all the individuals and all the different things that had to come together to make it possible for you to vote, it's an exceptional, amazing thing.
All right, so now obviously you've seen why one of our student government senators believes that the midterms do matter, and now we're going to take a quick look here at why Alexa thinks the midterms matter. Obviously, you got started on that a little more, but let's go more in depth of why students should vote, because nothing's more infuriating than to hear my friends say, "Oh, I don't want to vote because it doesn't matter." It does matter, and
right.
You're only perpetrating that it doesn't matter if you don't vote. So
absolutely no, and I think for young voters, especially those that are in college and have debt, I think student debt is a big place to vote here. And
absolutely.
Mark Warner and his bipartisan bill with Marco Rubio, Student Loan Repayment Act. I think that's a very interesting thing to kind of bring up in the sense of student debt. And not familiar with that, it's kind of something where you'd be paying back a percentage of your student loans based on your income.
A standard progressive tax.
Right. And in government terms, which are much better than me. And so I think that's something different. That's definitely interesting. That should have pulled more people towards Warner today. I think voting on those kinds of issues, even though economy wasn't one of the higher things in our exit poll, I think that's one of the issues that really should have brought people out to vote today.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. What do you think, John?
For why people should vote, I'd certainly say
especially of our demographic.
Yeah, especially if our demographic is national debt. I think I mentioned that earlier in the show too, is that we're inheriting all of these problems. We're inheriting all of this mess. So we can kind of start working at it now by voting in people who want to take care of it. And it's issues of specific importance, I think, are economic issues and national debt issues, which is an economic issue because we want jobs when we get out of college. We want jobs, for our kids one day. We want jobs all the way down the road, so we need to lay a solid economic foundation for that now, for the future of the country. That's why I think it's very important for people to vote.
What about you?
Yeah, and I think
obviously we're all in agreement here. Students should be voting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I believe voting matters for college students just because of the standard motto of just like your voice does matter, your voice should matter, and I'll just be upfront and just say that we did the exit poll of the job approval of who approves of Obama's job and voted for Mark Warner. I am one of the 12 people who disapprove of Obama's job, but actually for different reasons than Storm and John would probably say I want him to go more left. I would just say tax the rich, and I think Mark Warner has done a good job, and I think like the candidates available to vote for today Mark Warner did do a good job of standing up and trying to be bipartisan, trying to make something work, trying to make something happen, trying to make our voices heard by working with the other side, because that's what we always want. We always want the ideal politician of someone who's able to work with both sides. We want that, and on paper, but then just because there's a D or an R next to their name, that doesn't mean we're going to vote for them. Right. And I think it's important for things like this to read up on who you're voting for, to make sure that like they actually stand for what you believe in, and I think that's an important thing.
And that segues well to our next topic. Obviously, we've talked about Marco Rubio and Mark Warner's student debt bill that may come up for consideration either maybe in the lame duck session, we'll see if that happens, or in the next session. How do you think that relates to our student debt problem? Obviously, a lot of students here at Mason have debt. They have loans. Student debt has been steadily climbing, especially for out-of-state students here at George Mason. So how do you think that we can address this problem? Obviously, a bill would be a good start.
Right.
But it's a fundamental problem of college affordability as well. Obviously, that results in debt. But how do you think we should approach this?
I think again, I'll just be honest. I'm fortunate enough where I won't incur any student debt when I graduate from college, and I thank my parents for that. But I would say that student debt is such like a complex issue, and I feel like people conflate like the factors of student debt and what goes into student debt. I think it's always a lot on like individual state budgets, what they're willing to allocate to higher education, versus, let's just use Virginia as a case study. Virginia's economy is so reliant on defense spending, where in the national conversation, defense spending gets cut the most, because there's a lot that's a huge part of the pie in terms of the budget. But I think student debt is just it's interesting that student debt is even sort of like a political football, in that everyone agrees that student debt needs to be paid off. Everyone agrees that getting rid of student debt is a good thing, but no one is able to really agree on the core fundamentals of how to address the student debt. But I do think that the Rubio and Warner bill is a good way to do that, because it is a progressive tax. It's the most equitable way of, if you make more after you graduate, you have to pay like a larger percentage of that student debt at a time. It seems like the most common sense solution to student debt, to me at least.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on
it. Yeah, and also we could talk about education as a whole, especially here in the Commonwealth. Obviously, student debt seems to be a key issue, but also education funding goes hand in hand with that, I'd say. When you're seeing huge cuts from the state or the Commonwealth, it's obviously going to make it very hard to make a university's budget to work and adequately fund programs that students need and use. So I think that should be definitely top on the list of issues that students go to vote for. So what do you guys think of the cuts that obviously came down from the Commonwealth?
I mean, I honestly, as this university, I think, it's definitely upsetting. You're talking about things that people use. People use student media, and student media, other aspects of this university. It's affecting what buildings we put on our campus, everything like that. So, I really think there are a lot of these broader issues that maybe those who aren't coming out to vote don't really understand. It's all under this broad term of the economy. Oh, it's something big and scary. Yeah. Whereas it's really, if you read more into it, it's really affecting you, right down to the fact that you're sitting in a chair that doesn't, have a leg or is falling apart,
Right.
Right. So I think it's definitely impacting higher ed where students can see it, and it really, that's why these midterms are, important.
They say they'll make the cuts in areas where students aren't going to see it, but students are going to see everything.
Everything in the university.
There's nowhere that they're going to be able to cut that students aren't going to get, unless they started cutting staff costs or administrative costs or anything like that.
But we're still going to see it there.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see it in lots of faculty.
The administrator that we need is not going to be there when we need them.
And even then, I think it's a typical conservative argument to argue that there's a lot of like inefficiencies in like the college system. But I feel there's just a report that was sent to me recently that just the other day, the Virginia State Senate looked into what it would actually save if they reduce these supposed inefficiencies, and it would only save each student about $200 to $300 at most.
Right.
So there is some sort of like deeper core issue than
Right.
just simple like structural changes or anything like that. It's just how we approach student debt, in that like student debt keeps getting shifted and transferred to bank. No one knows where to pay their student debt,
Right.
and it's a bigger issue than just like reducing inefficiencies, I feel.
Right. When you see a 16 to 18% increase in tuition when you're here for 4 years, you know, obviously something's got to be done about that. But we're going to go to commercial real quick. When we come back, we're going to dive into some of the early election results from the Commonwealth that are coming in. So keep it tuned here to Student Media's live election coverage 2014. Welcome back to Student Media's live election coverage 2014. We're going to dive right into results here. There's been some called races already. First, we're going to start off here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Senate race between Gillespie and Warner. Warner is 56-42 Gillespie currently. Obviously, that's because, like we said, the western part of the state reports first. Northern Virginia takes a long time to come in. It'll be interesting to see if this lead hangs around up until about 15 to 20% reporting. Right now it's only 5% in. Around the country, we've had a few called races in addition to the McConnell race. We have South Carolina. Republican Tim Scott has been declared the winner. He is actually the first African-American Republican to be elected or the first African-American in general to be elected in the South since Reconstruction. So that actually is a groundbreaking race there. In South Carolina, Lindsey Graham has been reelected and declared the winner. And in West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capito has been declared the winner. 0% reporting, but it's well known that she's going to pick up the seat. And that actually is a GOP pickup there because obviously of the retirement. So what do you guys think of that so far?
I've actually got some breaking news real quick.
Yeah.
The Crist campaign in Florida filed a motion to extend voting hours. They did that just a little bit before the voting hours closed at 7. They did it at the Circuit Court for the 17th Judicial Circuit in Florida to extend the hours from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., something to do with issues at various polling locations. So they filed an emergency motion to extend voting hours in Florida. We'll see what happens with that.
And we heard the same thing in North Carolina. The State Board of Elections is meeting right now to discuss potentially extending poll hours at, I believe, 3 different counties, which are having some issues, I guess. But I think just going off the poll results, I didn't exactly catch how many precincts are in, but for Virginia Senate. But I do feel that because Gillespie's numbers, even with these early results, aren't looking as good as they should. If were there to be some sort of signal that Gillespie might have been polling better than any polls thought, if it's just, I believe, 56 to 44.
Yeah.
If it were a true game changer, you would see Gillespie running at least in the 60s, if not a little higher in these more rural counties, which he would have to count on for any sort of upset.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, again, it's at 6% reporting now, 57-41, so he's hovering around that 60% range. Usually you'd need to get above 60 in the western part of the state to even have a chance of making it out of Northern Virginia. We saw that happen with Romney in 2012. Everyone thought it was looking great in Virginia, and then all of a sudden Fairfax starts reporting, and Arlington and Alexandria, and that lead was gone within minutes. Right. So it'll be interesting to see how that starts to play out, and obviously we'll keep you updated on that. I find it interesting that they're trying to extend polling hours. What do you guys think of that?
I mean, I think that with the advent of these electronic polling machines, there's always just going to be like malfunctions. Mm-hmm. There's always just going to be like people unsure, like disputes with like polling places and all that stuff. Right. And I think it's nothing to be too concerned about, because it's just the product of this massive system where we're trying to cram everything into 12 hours over the course of a Tuesday, where it just seems wholly inefficient to try to do all this. So of course there's just going to be some flaws in the system, but I think it's fine.
I mean, I think and we're going to get to this more later, but you know, even some precincts in Virginia were reporting that they were having problems with their, their electronic ballot boxes. Calibration issues. So I think we're going to see, that being the forefront of the problem. I don't think it's anything too groundbreaking here.
And I wouldn't say it's indicative of anything one way or the other politically at all. If anything, it's just more.
Well, we'll see.
But
they should probably make those voting machines in America. Just a little inroad there. But let's move on to our next topic and the control of the Senate. Obviously, most seem to predict that the GOP will take control of the Senate this evening.
Right, and CNN, sorry to interrupt you, is reporting that Republicans currently need 5 seats to take the Senate.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, because of that one pickup in West Virginia. So, like
And
I
because
said,
of the hold in Kentucky.
yeah, North Carolina should start reporting soon.
But like you said, the control of the Senate is at stake right now.
Yeah.
And it's a huge topic of debate of just figuring out if the GOP takes it, how many seats will they get at this point? It's almost a foregone conclusion. And I believe in our predictions on Mason Vote's blog, I predicted 53 to 47, and you predicted 54. 54, which is a pretty generous prediction. But I think it'll be interesting to see exactly what the numbers shake out to be. Of course, the big one that's like the most uncertain that we haven't mentioned is the Kansas election, where incumbent Pat Roberts, longtime GOP senator, is going against an independent who hasn't publicly stated at all who he'll caucus for. So I think the control of the Senate is an interesting topic. But
well, my question for the panel actually is, with the Republicans potentially taking the Senate and set up for the biggest House majority in 65 years here in the country, what do you guys think it means about the direction of the country if Republicans take the Senate and the House again? What does that mean about our direction?
I mean, basically, you're going to see more partisanship in Congress. I mean, I think it's going to be, it's going to be a fight for these last 2 years in terms of getting things passed and really going against kind of, Obama's last 2 years.
If anything, it'll cause more polarity than what's already there, because the Republican Congress has shown an unwillingness to work with Obama. Obama has shown an unwillingness to work with House Republicans or Senate Republicans. But I think control of the Senate is almost overblown in a sense, because people want to have all these wish fulfillments of the Senate now will change control. So now we're going to go repeal Obamacare. We're going to go do anything.
Exactly.
But they fail.
That's my favorite one.
But they fail to grasp that the GOP will not get enough seats to overcome the filibuster-proof majority, and of course the president always has the presidential veto in his pocket, ready to veto any legislation that comes his way. So I do think, obviously, yes, it is an important thing, and we were just discussing this in one of my classes last night with Professor Bill Schneider, where in 1996, I believe, where Clinton had or no, 98 it would be then, where Clinton had the same thing happen to him, where he faced in midterm elections where he lost the Senate, he lost the House, and then he had to work. He just had to work. And it just comes down to that. You're
probably talking about 94.
Yeah, 94.
Oh, 94. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see too President Obama's reaction if the Republicans take the Senate compared to President Clinton's reaction. President Clinton kind of had this, okay, we got to work. He admitted to his Democrats, we lost this. This is what the direction is. We got to work now. It'll be interesting to see if that's the same attitude President Obama has, or is he going to have more of an obstructionist attitude? It'll be interesting to see what his reaction is.
On both sides, for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, also in the same class discussion, is that what Clinton had going for him though was that he could hang his hat on an economic boom. He had the .com boom, and that was a big driver of bipartisanship, because even though Republicans had control of Congress, they saw that the economy was going well. They saw that people were generally happy with what's going on. But I don't know if we'll see the same thing from Obama. I
was just about to say that's the main difference between Clinton and Obama. Clinton was willing to work with the Republicans and make some sort of inroad in bipartisan legislation and compromise. Obama's not going to compromise. It's fairly clear what he wants for his second portion of his second term, but that's not going to happen now. So we're going to see where he goes with executive orders. We're going to see what kind of legislation the GOP is putting out there. Obviously, the repeal of Obamacare is not going to happen unless they get some willing Democrats to go along with them. If they get 54, maybe you can see a case where the two independents potentially go with them, and you find 2 or 3 Democrats. And it's obviously far-fetched. It's obviously far-fetched, but they're going to be vulnerable in their elections as well, especially if Obamacare continues to be wildly unpopular. The implementations were delayed until after the election for good reason, because it's going to tear our system apart. So you're only going to see that go further down.
And what you brought up was a good point too. It's the big overarching question now. If or when the Republicans take control of the Senate, who's in charge? Who's the leader of the Senate? Right. You have these dueling factions of
probably
Mitch McConnell. I believe Mitch McConnell will probably end up again as majority leader. You have these dueling factions of the establishment Republicans and the Ted Cruz-led Tea Party Republicans, libertarians, whatever you want to call them, in the House or in the Senate. And it'll just see where this power struggle goes. We've seen in in the Obama presidency, where there's been a lot of Republican infighting, whether it's been the presidential candidate in 2012 or within the House and the Senate, that there's been a lot of infighting, and it has led to a lot of fracturing of the Republican Party that's been shown to be disapproved by Americans, even those loyal to the Republican Party.
Yeah.
No one wants to see that, and
Yeah.
and it'll be interesting to see.
And I think you're going to see that go even further now, because tomorrow morning starts the 2016 presidential campaign.
Yep.
Republicans are going to be fighting each other for that, and there's no clear front runner, so that has the potential to be a pretty nasty primary race. And we'll talk more about 2016 and the national political landscape come tomorrow morning. I mean, we're not going to know exactly the full extent until the runoffs are completed, if they're needed.
And even Alaska,
Yeah, good old Alaska out there. That's all right. I'll be up at 3 a.m. watching that one. But we're going to take a quick commercial break now. Stay tuned here at Student Media's live election coverage for more insight, analysis, and results as they come in. Welcome back to Student Media's coverage of election 2014. We're going to give you a quick update on some results that we have here coming in now. In the Virginia Senate race, Ed Gillespie is still up 55 to 45, so about a 10-point spread. It's not nearly as much as it should be for any sort of upset. So I think quickly you're going to see here the votes switch. And Warner will take the lead once Northern Virginia starts to report in. The vote count as stands is 138,000 to 110,000, so it's not that much of a difference. Sarvis is polling about 3% currently. Do you think that's a little bit lower or higher than you anticipated? Because that's a little bit lower than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think it's a little lower given what the governor election ended up being. But I do think that Sarvis just is not necessarily a strong candidate, and if anything, Sarvis, the demographic that Sarvis is targeting, kind of pulls from both parties. He pulls the young vote from the Democrats, and he pulls the more libertarian side from the Republican candidate. So I think it is a little surprising to see Sarvis polling low. But again, like I said, he's not necessarily the strongest third party candidate you could throw out there. But he does have a little name recognition from the governor race.
I mean, my question for Sarvis too is he has the potential, if he wanted to ultimately decide a winner if he were to throw his vote towards one or the other. And that's what I wanted to ask him if I had the chance to interview him on the show. We couldn't get him on the show this year. Is who would you prefer between Mark Warner and Ed Gillespie? Because he could potentially, if he threw all of his supporters in one direction or the other, he could decide one over the other. And I think that's an interesting aspect. I don't know if he's ever thought about that strategy or not, but that's what I've always been curious about with Robert Sarvis. And
we have some very small results in the 11th Congressional District with 1% reporting. We have Jerry Connolly in the lead with 53%. It's only 539 votes to 445 for Suzanne Scholte, so 44%. You're going to see that, really start to take off within the next, I'd say, 20 minutes is when Fairfax usually starts to get in. And in the 10th Congressional District, Barbara Comstock is up 65 to 31. It's about a 2,400 vote difference, so I think you're going to see that get called relatively quickly.
Because I feel with the 10th district, there are a lot of those more rural areas.
It's R+6 to begin with, so I mean, it's set up favorably for Republicans.
Right. That's not a shock.
Yeah. And in North Carolina and Georgia, we have some early results starting to come in. In Georgia, 2% of the results are in. And Purdue leads none 62 to 36. Obviously, these are all going to be rural, more Republican counties. And in North Carolina, an early indicator of the national trend here, Tom Tillis is actually up 52% to 44, about a 4,000 vote lead. Again, 2 or 3% reporting here, and we'll be watching that closely. So that about does it for the election results. Now we're going to dive into our next topic, which I'm sure is going to be interesting, on domestic issues. So obviously foreign policy, economy, all that stuff is very important, but a lot of voters value domestic issues.
Especially at college.
Especially college students. So I'll let you take the lead on that. Where do you want to start?
I think it was evident in the exit polling that we did that social issues, domestic policy, we had those as options on our exit polls, and that they matter to students and they matter to voters in general, because like we were trying to debate earlier, is that there's this narrative of there's one party that's one social side. That like if you're a liberal, like you're obviously one social side, and GOP party, there's like another social side, and there's no real like compromise to it. And I think social issues are a naturally divisive thing because they are one of the issues that affect us most directly. Whereas you talk, like you said, like for foreign policy and debt and stuff like that, those are more just like nebulous ideas that we like think of, and we see these numbers, and obviously they're bad, but we can't really contextualize them in the way that we do social issues, where that like same-sex marriage or women's rights and all these things, and even like race inequality. These are things that impact us directly, and I do think that they're largely important to how we vote and how we live as a society.
Right. No, I mean, I definitely have to agree with what you're saying. I mean, a lot of young voters are turning out for social issues, and I think those are definitely topics that, I mean, when you see topics like same-sex marriage or women's rights that maybe have to do with abortion, there's a lot of them are very two-sided, so it is very easy and kind of a more bipartisan or our partisan way of looking at government that it's very natural that one side's going to pick up one thing and one side's going to pick up the other. There isn't a lot of room for in between here.
Right.
What do you guys?
Let's pick an issue and run with it. What issue you guys going to start with? Equal pay or what?
Yeah, equal pay. That's if you want to go into equal pay just for a little bit, because I know we talked about it a little bit before. I was just looking at a chart this morning. I forgot from exactly where, but it's not only just equal pay between men and women, but like I said before, there are race issues involved. It's between white men, white women, black men, black women, Latino men, Latino women, and it shows favorably that white people are paid percentages more than the next race, and it goes beyond. But I'm not saying that equal pay for women is not a thing we should fight for. It's obviously a thing that we need to fight for. But that there are these deeper things that we're not even looking into just yet, that we're only scratching the surface, and how we're understanding how these economic policies affect social issues, I think.
Exactly. I was just about to say that is how you decide how you're going to legislate that. What do you specifically target? So I think that's the biggest issue there is like you said, diving in and deciding what we need to legislate for in order to change this, because right now there's really no general idea. Obviously, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was passed, but have we seen effects of that? Not necessarily. So what would be more effective in legislating, I think, is a key issue when you're looking at that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what are the other suggested ways from the Democrats? I know there was a law that got rejected in the Senate recently that had to do with equal pay, but what are the solutions? That do Democrats just want to say, okay, if you have a man and a woman who are both doing the same job, the same work, whatever, and you're paying the man higher for whatever reason, we don't know why, but if you are, you go to jail, you get fined. Like, what is the solution to the supposed problem?
No, the supposed problem. No, but I think it goes beyond gender identity. Obviously, I think it goes beyond that, and it just goes. It's the effects of like conservative economic policy, where these minimum wage jobs end up going to predominantly more minority workers rather than white workers who see favorable discrimination in their favor, if that makes any sense. Where immigrants and foreign employees are just not given as many opportunities because they don't have like the education opportunities. The immigration laws preventing work status is heavily opposed to them getting a fair shot in today's society. And
so the accusation isn't necessarily sexism or racism. It's just it's just how they were.
It goes. I mean, obviously, you can't disconnect social policy and economic policy. One directly impacts the other, and the one hand feeds the other, because what you set out as economic policy directly impacts how society works. But
so, like, if it is sexism on the male-female gender wage gap, if it is sexism, how do you know whether or not what's in the mind of an employer of why somebody's getting paid more than somebody else? How does the government know that? How do they know whether or not it's sexist or not? What if one's just doing their job better? What if a female's doing their job better than a male? They're doing the same job. I think I'm being discriminated against at my current job. There's a female at work who gets paid more than me, but I think I do my job better. My boss is a female. Is that sexist? Is that what's going on?
No, because I feel like there's not really a merit-based system in regards. It's more, it's not even just discrimination right now, which is still very prevalent. It's discrimination in the past against women, against minorities, because the idea of these salaries being higher ended up being more related to the fact that white men, have been in these jobs much longer, so they get these step increases and raises in their pay. And I think it's just more about making sure we hire more women, making sure we hire more minorities, so they're eligible for these step increases because they provide just as much value in work as a white man or as a man versus a woman, anything like that. Just making sure we get them in these jobs, making sure these opportunities are available to them.
A little bit like affirmative action, but for companies?
A little bit, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Because I feel like there have been so many discriminatory policies in the past against these people of color, these women, that I honestly
so
do
you suggest like a quota that a company has to fulfill, or like, well, what's the solution? That's what I'm just trying to figure out. What is the solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking at everything. Maybe a quota is what we need, honestly, but.
And if it's a quota, my question comes to fairness too. If there's a race A candidate for the job and race B candidate for the job, and race A candidate is better qualified for the job, but the company's got to fill the quota, they're going to go with candidate B. Like, that doesn't seem fair to me. That doesn't seem like it's the American way. I mean, that's why I find these various inconsistencies, and I just don't understand where the solution is going to come from.
I think you have to take a look at the diversity in your workforce to begin with. If you see that there is an issue where you're predominantly hiring white people, or you're even predominantly hiring people of color, it's more important to. I think it's more important to foster. It's more important to foster economic or racial diversity at this point because of all these economic policies that seem to go against. That seem to go against them.
I just think a company's concerns got to be made with creating jobs and getting the best people to do the jobs rather than filling some sort of government quota for diversity. There's great candidates across all races for all job positions. I think the focus should just be hiring the people that are going to do what's best for your company to succeed, so you can create a better company, hire more people for a better America.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you though as well, Hal. I think it goes back to this country's history and what the policies used to be. It's something that's going to take a while to work out. I do think some strides are being made, not nearly what needs to be, but to set a quota, I think would be not right. It should be, if you have the qualifications and you work hard, you can have this job if you're the best candidate. It shouldn't be, oh well, now I have to hire a woman, or now I have to hire someone with a specific race. It shouldn't be like that. It should be who's best for the job, and if I think you're seeing a huge emergence into the workforce of women in the younger generation. So I think that over time is going to have an even bigger effect than anything could possibly be legislated.
Yeah, and I mean, even beyond the quotas, like the quotas is obviously just an example.
Right.
But I think the underlying thing, like I was saying, tying economic policy to social policy, it starts from something as simple as education.
Yeah.
It starts as
Absolutely.
the reason affirmative action was a big thing, Baker versus Carr in California, the University of California, is that minorities and people of color are just from the start, they're disenfranchised from getting these same opportunities that they would later in life. And you can't look at a diverse workforce just on the level of the diverse workforce. It goes so far beyond that at such a young age that people of color are discriminated against so early on that they can't do this, or that they should do this versus what they want to do and what they have the ability to do. And I think you can't look at something as complex as trying to make a more diverse workplace, trying to make a more diverse society, than just looking at it just pure numbers of just like a quota of yes, I mean, obviously we want people who are most qualified and best fit for the job, but it goes so far back in your lifespan that
it goes far back to what opportunity are you what opportunities are you exposed to, and honestly, I think affirmative action has started to since that case has really started to try to make that opportunity a bit more equal. But I do have to agree with Hal here that I want everyone who's most qualified to be getting those positions. Sometimes it really does come down to, where did you start, and how are you gaining these qualifications? Yeah. Because it's, the qualifications for jobs now, it's becoming incredibly competitive, especially in a place like Washington, D.C. I mean, if you want a, high level, well-paying job. So, I think it really comes down to what opportunities are you faced with, and it's just that more often than not, minorities don't aren't offered those same opportunities.
So let's talk about, real quick, just gun control. And then we'll jump to immigration policy, because that'll be a little bit of a comprehensive discussion.
Right.
So gun control, it's become another really heavily politicized issue over the past few years. Obviously, we've had some tragic school shootings and workplace violence. It's something that needs to be stopped. My argument is taking those guns away is not going to stop that, because if those people want to get the guns, they're still going to do it the illegal way. So I think it goes back to, we have a mental health problem in this country that's not adequately addressed at all. But staying on gun control here, do you think that the government should be legislating further which guns should and should not be for sale?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Obviously.
I honestly, it's a little joke, but I do wish what Republicans demonize Obama, he's going to come take away all our guns. I wish that was a reality. Honestly, I don't. I don't think you need to be able to have such easy access to guns. I know, yes, there is. We need to readdress the way we talk about mental health, and like the mental health system is very poor in this country. But I just don't believe that giving such an easy access to an instrument of death that's just so easily accessible and causes so much havoc and suffering so easily should be so readily available in Walmart.
Right.
Wait, so do you support a full gun ban?
Yeah, I would.
Full gun ban?
Yes.
Everything down to handguns?
Well, my question is, what do you say to all the people who have saved their own lives and saved the lives of their families, saved the lives of their children because they had a gun in their house to protect them against somebody who was breaking the law, probably got their gun illegally, and are breaking into their house, breaking the law again? What do you say to them?
Probably got their gun illegally. Is that what?
A lot of them do, yes. A lot of criminals get their guns illegally because they can't get through a background check that we do have.
If we take the guns away from the people who get it
see.
legally, you're just letting those who are not using it for proper things still have it.
And then I would go back to one of those things that background checks should be more comprehensive. Obviously,
but what do you say? What do you say to somebody who saved the lives of their children because they had a gun to protect themselves?
I would say, yeah, that's a good thing. But
and now, what do you say about?
But I feel like there are more reasonable ways to respond to it. But I think, and there are more responsible people that we can trust with guns rather than just giving it to citizens, rather than just allowing it to citizens.
But the average police response time to a home for an armed robbery is 7 minutes. You could easily be dead in that time. Takes them a second to pull
right, but that
trigger.
also kind of gets to the point too, where you bring up they're probably getting these guns illegally, but not all of them, but then what's to say that someone who could obtain that gun legally isn't going to still go commit that crime? I mean, then
right.
they're not.
I totally agree with you, but at the same time, you should be emphasizing removing illegal guns from the streets and getting rid of gang violence and all that stuff.
And one other thing, too, is I know a big push is the assault rifles. Well, I think something that's really unregulated that you might want to regulate first is hammers, knives, because those are used in more murders than assault rifles are. So, I mean, let's start where the real problem is, which is hammers and knives and blunt objects.
But let's be realistic. What causes more damage in a quicker time? Assault rifles.
But let's be honest, what do the stats say if more people have died from which or the other? It's the other. It's not the assault rifles.
Because there have been some reasonable bans on assault rifles.
Well, yeah. Regardless, I think it's obviously our Second Amendment right to bear arms. So for the government to step in and say that they can legislate against that is basically shredding up the Constitution. Not that Obama hasn't already done that. But it's shredding the Constitution. You're literally stepping all over the Second Amendment and saying, we're going to grab your guns and we're going to collect these. And, we can have as many guns as possible, and we have armed guards. Michael Bloomberg, Mr. I want to grab your guns, has 6 armed guards with him at all times because he's worth $18 billion. So it's just a level of hypocrisy. I'm sure half of these congressmen that would vote to remove guns have guns in their home. So I just think it's completely ridiculous. But we're gonna move on. It's speculation, but I think
there actually was a Democratic candidate recently in some state who was caught up in some issue. I think it was in Ferguson, and she actually had a gun on her. She was a Democrat, and she supported
State senator from Missouri was arrested with an illegal carry of a gun, and she supports gun control. So
so we have one.
Good. Yeah, exactly. So it's across the board. But we're gonna take a commercial break here. When we come back, we'll have some more discussion and we'll dive into immigration policy. But keep it tuned here to Student Media's Election Night Coverage 2014.
WGMU Radio and WGMURadio.com. Welcome to a special edition of the First Pick. Will read. Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. Appreciate it. I'm Ben Simpson. On the phone today, we have How are you doing today, Drew? I mean, your baseball. Kind of what made you decide to write a book about them?
You know, it wasn't my...
You're out in Maryland, right?
I am. I used to work with George Mason people that way.
Promote the book as much as possible here around campus.
Thanks, dude.
All right, have a great one. You will read. Jonah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. Appreciate it. You're listening to WGMU Radio on WGMURadio.com.
Welcome back to our election night coverage here in Student Media. We have a new panelist joining us here, Rohan Ramesh, co-host of Take It to the Hill on WGMU. Hello, Rohan. How are you? Joining in here. So now we're going to throw it over to Hanover Hall, where we have Ryan Thornton reporting for us. Ryan?
Hey, guys. I'm here in Hanover Hall, where students are starting to gather for the election coverage. As the results are coming in, we've got Sam Carpenter. He's a student government senate member. And I just wanted to ask Sam, how important is student participation on campus, especially in terms of political support, and how important is it that students our age are getting out and going to the polls and voting in these kinds of elections?
I think it's absolutely crucial. It's pretty simple. If you want to have a big change, or you want to see your coming out to events like this, you can meet other people who are parts of organizations and different movements and coordinate and make cool things happen. But the bottom line is, if you want to see something change, vote.
Yeah. And Sam, you've been a student government senator. You've been around campus. You're part of these organizations. You've been talking with students. What are you hearing are the big issues for students? What's really driving student turnout at these kinds of elections?
I think one of the biggest issues is definitely student debt. It's a big issue that affects students because of student debt. So I think there's a lot of discussion surrounding that as it affects a large number of us, especially in this discussion. I think a lot of other social issues are also afloat in discussion because they affect us on a day-to-day basis. It's definitely an important discussion point.
Yeah, and we saw student debt recently over the summer pass $1.2 trillion. Thank you, Sam. And now we're going to actually cut back to, we did some exit polling over at Merton Hall earlier today. We're going to cut across to that.
I voted for Ed Gillespie, and then I also voted for Goodlot, who's in a different district. I'm from Front Royal, Virginia, but I did do a lot of campaigning for Barbara Comstock here in the 10th District.
I voted for Mark Warner and Jerry Connolly.
Ed Gillespie.
Gillespie.
I voted for Mike Warner and Jerry Connolly.
The biggest issue right now I think our country's dealing with, I think, is the economy. And I think it's taken a really sharp turn in the last 6 years under the Obama administration. And I'm glad to see, or hopefully I'll see, the Republicans take control of the Senate and hopefully turn back some of the policies that I disagree with, such as tax increases and government subsidies.
Well, I definitely think that Mark Warner has had a profound impact on Virginia's economy, keeping us the #1 business state in America. So that definitely was the most important issue that I voted on.
I'm usually voting Republican, ballot voter. I just grew up in a conservative family, and I heard him on the radio once on 630 WMAL, and liked what he had to say, and believe in what he's trying to accomplish.
Nothing really in particular, just because, our Senate really has been the majority has been Democrats, and I really don't approve of what they've been doing, just the connections, what they've been doing. And so I just thought it was a change.
I think it'd probably be just general research that I've done online, as well as going to see Mark Warner speak on student debt, which is a major issue for me. So, yeah.
All right, we're back in Hanover Hall, where students are gathered for the election night watch party. I'm going to throw it back over to Storm over at our panel. Storm?
We're going to dive right back into the domestic discussion here, because I think there was a lot of stuff we didn't get to hit on.
Oh, absolutely.
So I guess let's go for immigration now. We have a president who obviously has not done his job in keeping our border secure and keeping illegal immigrants out of the country. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts that the policy should be going forward? Obviously, Obama has made it very clear that he's going to act solely by executive action after the election on amnesty. Surprise, after the election, just like everything else. So go ahead and give me your thoughts on all this.
I'm going to let Rohan go first.
Yeah,
since
go
he's
Thank you.
right here.
Okay, so when it comes to securing our borders, a lot of the stuff we hear from the conservative side is ISIS is going to come over. They're going to bring Ebola on their backs. What I'm trying to point out is that conservatives really want to point out that our borders are weak and they're terrible, but they're not. Of course, illegal immigrants are coming over, and that's an issue we need to focus on. But I don't think it's the end of the world, or at least the end of America. And I think we need to focus on the immigrants already here right now, like mainly the kids who were brought over by parents and like are now older, and they did not grow up in Mexico or where they came from. They grew up in America, and we should be focusing on giving them citizenship.
So you say that the borders aren't weak, but
Democrats
also say that we do have an illegal immigration problem?
No, we do. We do have an illegal immigration problem, and we need to focus on fixing our borders, but it's not a big issue, as big an issue as you conservatives go out and make it. It's not the end of America.
All I know is I saw a video recently by an investigative reporter. I'm forgetting his name. But he did go across the border, and I think he dressed
in an Osama bin
Laden suit mask. He went and ran across the border and did this whole thing all the way to
America.
That
was one guy, John. How many terrorist attacks have been on our soil since 9/11?
How many illegal immigrants get across our borders every day?
That's true. And I agree. And there are many Democrats who believe that we need to fix this problem. But terrorists are not coming over in droves.
You don't know that for a fact that terrorists didn't come over the southern border.
I can tell that since 9/11 we have not been
attacked. Right, but that doesn't mean they're not coming across the border. You don't know because you're not there.
This country,
we don't know who's coming.
I feel like the status quo right now is we're pretty safe, and unless a terrorist,
I would argue very much so against that.
Okay.
Why?
We are not safe at all currently.
What are your thoughts
We are
on
not
immigration?
safe at all.
We
even
are-
though
we
there's
are
been no
very-
terrorist attack in our country at all.
We
we're
have been
completely
safe.
not safe, right?
This country is at its weakest point that we've been since Obama took office. The world does not respect us. ISIS thinks we're a joke, and they could just come in here and do whatever they
If
want.
ISIS thinks we're a joke, they would be attacking us
They're
right
waiting.
now.
They're waiting.
They're waiting? How
They're
long are they
waiting.
going to wait? I'm waiting for them.
Law enforcement is on high
what are they
alert.
waiting for?
Our federal facilities are on high alert. DHS put them on high alert.
Mhm.
Do you not think that there's a threat? You saw in Canada
No,
what happened
these
with
guys,
a lone wolf.
These guys in
All
the
you
Middle
need is
East,
one guy.
they make threats to us. Yes, they are a problem, but they are not the Soviet Union. They do not have power against America.
Reining back into the immigration issue real quick. What are your thoughts on illegal immigration?
I mean, I think it's more, more interesting discussion I think we could have now is kind of what Rohan hit on, about taking care of some of the immigrants that are already here and some people, that, and the DREAM Act, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I honestly think it's a great thing. Those people who are, like Rohan said, they were born here, they were raised in America, and they were brought over as minors that maybe couldn't have made that choice themselves at the time. And I think it's really great that, we've given them a way into our higher education system, which I know you definitely do not agree with. So I want to hear a little bit of your thought on that.
Can I actually just, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to
no.
add on to you. So I'm an econ minor, and I've been taking economics of labor this past semester, and we've been really talking about immigration. And the thing that really struck me is like the amount of immigrants let into America. It's not that much. Like, I'm an immigrant myself. Like, my dad came over from India. And
legally,
yes,
yeah,
legally.
That's,
I'm not
that's
illegal.
the main difference. Well, obviously,
it's pretty hard to get from India to America legally.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, my father, he got a college degree. He's very educated, and there's a lot of uneducated but very hard-working immigrants that should be coming over to America legally. And I feel like the system we have right now does not support that. We only support the very, very highly educated, the very, those who have been given these gifts. But there are many who can come here to America and help us.
I'd say there are many who can come here, but they should come here legally.
It's very hard for them. It was very hard.
But there's a reason.
For my father,
my
father, it took us about like 5 years to come over to America when we started the process to over. And that's a very educated man who already had a job offer in America.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how hard it is for the uneducated worker in Mexico who does not have the qualification but is just as hardworking as any American worker?
I want to hear your holistic thoughts on all of
Yeah,
this.
so there's a border for a reason. If basically the border is just open. For you to say it's well guarded and closed, that's totally ridiculous. There's thousands of illegal immigrants flooding into this country every day, and DHS is using taxpayer dollars and buses to bus them around the country. There's over 2,900 here in Fairfax County, which is just absolutely ludicrous. And for higher education institutions such as this one to allow those illegal immigrants in, I think is a slap in the face to every single citizen in this country. And not only that, they're getting in-state tuition on those rates. And, you know, I'm sitting here paying $40,000 a year. They're here probably getting a free education. Have they paid taxes? Probably not. Have they provided anything into the system? Probably not. Are they legal? No. So we're breaking the law willingly in allowing these students into the system. Do I think they should get an education? Absolutely. But I think that when you have students in this country who can't get into George Mason University, but you're going to let illegals in here, you know, that's just ridiculous.
You know, I feel like there's a huge stigma when we talk about these immigrants and they're illegal.
We're not supposed to call them illegal according to the Obama administration.
Well,
but,
okay,
undocumented,
undocumented, illegal, whatever. When we talk about these people and they come over illegally, be that as it may, illegally. Yeah. Even so, they are still people. They come from Mexico. They are not terrorists. I believe a mass majority of illegal immigrants that come over are not coming to attack America.
Obviously.
They're coming over because America is a land of opportunity. And to put that, you know, label illegal, it just sounds so dirty. And yes, it is true. We need to focus on.
It's the truth, though.
It's the truth.
They're breaking the law. When you break the law, it's something called illegal.
And I feel like we need to fix the law to allow these immigrants to come over legally.
But shouldn't we fix the border first so we protect ourselves and then come up with a good system?
We are protected, John. I mean,
we're not
protected.
You're not
protected. You can't guarantee that.
Yes, John.
Just like we were guaranteed that Ebola would never get here. Oh, well, it turns out it got here. They don't know everything.
Did you know Kim Kardashian has married more than people who died from Ebola in America?
That's not the point.
Ebola is not a problem in America. Don't bring it
up.
I
didn't say it was a problem. I'm just saying the government told us when there was Ebola going on in other countries, oh, that's not gonna. There's a very little chance that could ever come here. Guess what? It's here. Well, if you say there's a very little chance,
he was very irresponsible.
There's a very little chance that we could.
But there should be a travel ban. But getting back to immigration,
but there's a very little chance that a terrorist could walk over our open borders.
John, that's just as saying like there's the same amount of chance that there's aliens walking around in our streets, but we can't prove it. So,
but the argument that we're safe because there's been no attack is a flawed argument because we were safe before 9/11.
That's
we
true.
were safe before 1993.
But we have taken measures. We have taken
but we aren't taking measures at the border. Why don't we have something at the border protecting us from people coming across without us knowing?
If terrorists were actually here and they were doing stuff, then maybe your argument would have merit. But the fact is,
you can't prove that they're not here.
You can't prove they're not here and that they're not doing stuff because we don't know.
Then what do we do? Do we just act paranoid? Do we just close our borders to everybody?
Well, no, let me tell you. Yes, I mean, we don't know if they're here because we're not keeping track.
It was Thomas Jefferson himself who said, "A country without borders is not a country at all."
I believe it.
And we don't know if they're here because we're not keeping track. We need to let people in our country, let them come in legally, but keep track of who's here and who's leaving.
I believe you conservatives love to quote Ben Franklin, who made that quote. I don't know exactly what it is, but it was something along the lines of, if you're willing to trade your security for your freedom, you don't deserve either. And I believe
we're not trading our freedom. We're trading our freedom to keep them out.
Right.
Even so, I don't see.
Which is our right
as a country. Right now.
No, it's our right as a country.
ISIS is not attacking
us.
We're talking about illegal immigration.
People are going over to the Middle East. They're not
talking about illegal immigration.
That's one portion of it. Is that we're open to a terrorist attack.
But your argument is because our borders are not strong, these terrorists can come over and they can attack us.
Our borders are not.
They're not strong.
They're not.
How do you explain the thousands of people coming across the border that we don't know about? You can't explain it, and that's why we don't know. Yeah. That's why it's dangerous, because the unknown is dangerous in this case.
But what has happened? What security issues have happened? Nothing has happened.
We don't know. The security issue that's happened.
When will we know?
The security issue is that
we have a 10 years from now. It's been 10 years.
But the whole point of a sleeper cell is to be in the country.
How long are they sleeping for? They've been sleeping for 13 years right now.
That's the whole point.
If you're a king and you have a castle,
you know what?
You don't just leave your door open.
The CIA and the FBI
without anybody
some of
checking
the
who comes in.
strongest agencies. They're probably the strongest agencies in the entire world. I trust they're doing their job when they try and find these sleeper cells and these terrorists in our country.
I'm sure they're doing their job, but the problem is Congress isn't doing their job. The president isn't doing his job in securing our borders as a country to keep us safe and to keep track of what's going on in our country, knowing who's here and knowing who's not here. That's the job.
Yeah. I've made my point. I don't believe that we are under attack right now. I think we are safe.
Okay. I'm not arguing that is the main point. I'm saying it's just ridiculous to not enforce our border security.
I feel like we need a lot of reform on who is illegal. Like we should have more.
Anyone who crosses illegally is illegal.
No, we should allow more people to come in legally. We should make it more relaxed. I'm not talking about terrorists. I'm talking about the worker in Mexico who does not have an education but is just as hardworking as anybody else.
There's a way. It's just you have to do the legal
way.
It's very hard. And it's hard.
It's very
and
hard
there could be
for
reform.
us, John.
There could be reform there, but let's let's protect our borders first.
I feel like if
and
you
then come
do
up
the
with that
reform
line.
there, then your argument that there's a lot of illegals coming in, I feel like that'll fix itself if we reform that part.
There's
of the
quotas
border.
for a reason on how many people can come into the country, just as there's quotas on how many people
That's
can come
true.
from India and how many people come
But
from Mexico.
but-
the only reason they get a
but
free
I-
ride is
I'm-
because they're right at our southern border.
But even
they
though
wouldn't any
we
other
have
time.
a lot of space in America, despite what people say, and I'm quoting Brian Kaplan, a
There's
libertarian
not space.
economic professor in George Mason. He is saying we have a lot of space. We are willing to take all these poor people in, and they can have a better life.
Well, he's wrong. We have 310 million, rapidly growing every single year.
And China
More
has
and more-
over 1 billion, and
Yeah.
we can support these people, and when they come over,
There's
they
not
will
jobs
be
for our
supporting
people.
us.
Why should we be giving them our jobs?
Well, but I think it's also important to realize that when people do come over, where are they going? They're going to cities.
California.
They're going
Because they just let them stay there and don't deport anyone, just like the rest of the country.
But they're going, they're going to cities where, it's hard for anyone, an average citizen, to get a job anyway. There are plenty of, spaces where, rural spaces where people aren't going to want to be doing their jobs, and obviously there are some people that don't want to live there. But I mean, I think it's a stretch to say that they're taking all of our jobs. I think that they're moving to these highly populated cities where, the job market isn't as strong. Whereas if, maybe they were moving out into more less populated areas where there are spaces, to work in factories.
The idea that these
areas.
are all hardworking people and they want to start a new lives for themselves is completely false. You have tons of gang members, cartel coming over. In California the other day, 2 Sacramento sheriff's officers, one was shot and killed. I don't know what the condition of the other one is currently. I'm not sure if he died. But was killed by an illegal immigrant who was deported in 2006, came back in 2008, deported in 2009, and then came back again. DHS and ICE and all them knew he was here, decided not to deport him back because they didn't think he had violent enough crimes, and he kills cops. What do you say to that family?
Without a doubt, that's terrible.
Like,
we need to look out for those cartel members, those gang members. But I feel like when you say that,
but that's
you don't
why
want to
you
label
control the
all
system. That's why you
illegal
don't just let them
immigrants.
all in.
But you can't label all illegal immigrants as violent gangbangers.
Exactly.
We did.
Immigrants have
Nobody labeled them that way.
No,
you're putting that label.
You're trying to label them as good doing and hard working.
I mean, immigrants are some of the most industrious people that have come over in these countries. They're
That's
more,
true.
they're more,
That's very
they're 15% more
true.
likely to start their own
I don't
business.
argue that,
That's
but it
very
needs
true.
to be done legally. Is the bottom line. And we should in this
We are a
country.
country of rule of
When did
law.
it become okay in this country to just knowingly break the law and have tons of illegals everywhere?
And if there's a problem with the law, then fix
No,
the
without
law.
a doubt,
But
we
don't
need to
break
fix
the law.
the illegals. But I feel like we need to allow the hardworking illegals or
We do
illegal
need to
right
acknowledge
now.
the people who
We
are
need-
here for a good purpose.
Yeah, and we need to protect against the gangbangers. But I feel like they're doing their job. I can trust the FBI and the CIA.
Do we have time for another domestic issue?
Yeah, sure. Let's real quickly talk voter ID.
Yeah.
Here we go.
We're obviously in favor of that. I would assume you're against it. How do you feel about that, Alexa?
Sorry, go ahead.
Are you not against it?
I've talked to John about this on the radio show.
Converted him.
To be honest, voter ID laws that says you need government IDs. If the state governments are willing to provide IDs to their citizenry, like free of charge or maybe a short price or whatever, they're willing to provide the IDs to them. Then yes, by all means, use voter ID laws. But the thing I have an issue with Republicans is they use these laws. They introduce them like months before the election, and by doing that, you hardly give time to those who can don't have the time or the resources to get these IDs. They cannot vote in time. That's the real problem I have with Republicans. Otherwise, voter ID laws.
Hey, we
sure,
didn't do that here
why
in
not?
Virginia this year. Way time in advance. This year we had the voter ID Virginia laws and everything.
It was way in advance.
Way in advance.
He's correct.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think I really have to, honestly, I think I really do agree with Rohan here. As long as, it is in advance, and it does give a disadvantage to, I think the most discussion has been centered around the elderly population that might not have the opportunity to get the proper ID or get their driver's license that they can no longer have, re-up to be able to vote. It puts some people in a difficult place, but I'm, in the overall sense of it, I wouldn't say I'm totally against it. I think it's made, honestly, it might make some of our candidates here, some of our voters here it might make it more difficult for them to vote, if you don't have a Virginia ID, in Virginia. You hold a, New Jersey driver's license, So I think
Mason IDs count as
Mason IDs do count, but have you seen how many times people have had to swipe them and you can't see their face anymore? It's
well, that's their own
it's
fault.
difficult too.
But they could easily go to the card office and get a new card.
They could. That that's much easier than getting an elderly person to the DMV. But
my argument is that it's overly politicized. You have the ACLU out at our polling place today asking people if they're having an issue with the voter ID, and none of them did. So I just find it to be completely ridiculous that you need an ID in this country to go buy alcohol. You need an ID to go buy cigarettes. You need an ID for basically everything. To board a plane, any of that stuff. Why shouldn't you need an ID to vote to prove that you are at least who you say you are?
I think we're all
in New
agreement
Jersey,
on this
I could vote. I could walk into any polling place that I'm with any name, if I know a name on there, say that's who I am, sign real quick to match the signature in the book, and go in and vote.
Right.
You don't have to show any ID. You don't have to prove who you are. None of that. And that's just where you open yourself up to tons of fraud. That's why you have districts in Philadelphia that were reporting 106% for Obama in 2012. There is election fraud in this country, and people that argue there's no election fraud are just completely wrong. And you see these calibration errors in machines. Maybe it is just an error. Maybe it is just an error, but that's a problem. We shouldn't be having that.
That is definitely a problem.
The calibration errors are definitely a problem, and some precincts in Virginia were reporting that they were having that problem. I don't think it's anything specifically, to sway the election, but I think when you do look at some of these fundamental problems of us just voting in general and how new ideas or new technologies advancing, that you're going to run into some issues, and I think this is the election where we're really going to where some of those issues are really going to be brought up.
Right. So let's take a quick look at some of the election results that are still coming in.
Yeah.
In the Virginia senatorial race, 39% now reporting. Gillespie is still up 52% to 46. The vote gap is currently about 60,000. Again, once we see Northern Virginia come in, you're going to start to see that erode. It is interesting that 40% he's still holding. I'd be interested to see once you get closer to the 60% reporting range if he's still holding anywhere close. In the congressional district races, in Congressional District 11, still only 7% of the vote in. Currently, it's 50 to 48%. Wow. Connolly is ahead by about 300 votes. So it'll be
we just had one
interesting.
come in from Fourth Estate, actually.
Oh, yeah?
We just had some numbers come in. 61% Connolly and 30% Scholte.
For the GMU location?
Yes, for the GMU location.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
for the
totally.
GMU location.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Wow,
Yeah.
that was really off of me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that's no surprise.
Inaccurate reporting. While we're talking about the GMU
what was the
location,
exact number?
For the GMU location, the district result, 61% Connolly, 30% Scholte, and 3% and 5% for the other respective parties represented.
Interesting.
Also at GMU, Mark Warner leads with 65% of the vote, followed by Gillespie with 24% of the vote, and Robert Sarvis with 9%.
Wow.
So for the exit poll was pretty close then. So we have 65% for Warner, 27% for Gillespie, and 6.5% for Sarvis. So Sarvis is overperforming at GMU. So that was interesting.
It's a college campus.
Yeah.
Definitely be interesting to see how he's performing at other campuses.
That's not surprising.
But I did mess up your results earlier, so maybe you want to repeat
It's
those.
okay. That's okay. In District 10 in Virginia, we have 18% of the vote in. Comstock is ahead by about 10,000 votes. Once you get to the 30-40% reporting range, you'll probably see that race get called.
Also in Virginia, David Bratt, who upset.
Did he win?
Who upset Eric Cantor.
62%.
It's been called. He won. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
David Bratt. Yep, it's been called. Dave Bratt has won his
It was
election,
a conservative
and he upset Eric
district,
Cantor, a Republican leader.
Yeah. Going around the rest of the country, in Georgia, currently David Perdue has 60% of the vote to Nunn's 38%. Obviously, it's only 10% reporting. Still a lot of time to go there. In North Carolina, Hagan is up 52 to 45, currently with 29% in. That's going to be another interesting barn burner. And New Hampshire is currently reporting in the urban areas 15% in, and Shaheen, no doubt, is ahead of around 57 to 43%. That's about 10,000 votes. So that gives you a general idea of the landscape that we're working with right now. Some other races around the country that are notable. Tennessee has been called for Lamar Alexander in the Senate. Oklahoma, Jim Inhofe has another big re-election. And also James Langford. That was a special election. I think that's about it. Do you guys have any other results or updates you want to give? Do we have anything further on the poll extensions? Has anything been posted on that?
I haven't looked, but I can.
I just have a comment.
I haven't seen any updates.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a comment about the Virginia senatorial race.
Real quick, the judge denied the emergency motion from Chris to extend voting hours in Florida.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So Gillespie's up by 50. He's 52%, and Warner's at 46%. But I feel like with the results right now, seeing it right now, and I'm no expert, but Northern Virginia has not completely reported, and I feel like
it's not even. It's like 1%.
Yeah.
It's going to go quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like with them so close right now, when Northern Virginia comes in, I think it's going to be a win for Warner.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is a small move, but Nate Silver's 538's saying that North Carolina is moving slowly down from the Democratic approval. Actually, 67% for Hagan. So.
Okay. Interesting. So we're going to go to commercial now. Keep it tuned here at Student Media's Election Night Coverage 2014. Welcome back to Student Media's Election Night Coverage 2014. We have some races that have just been called. In Pennsylvania, Democrat Tom Wolf has unseated the Republican incumbent, Tom Corbett. And in Arkansas, Tom Cotton has won against incumbent Democrat Mark Pryor. So that is a Republican pickup, and that will count towards the 6 seats they need to take the majority in the Senate. Any reaction on those races? The Pennsylvania governor obviously was thought to be going Democrat, but you know the GOP pickup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that a GOP pickup in the House?
No, the Senate. The Senate. Tom Cotton defeated Mark Pryor.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They called it with 1% of the vote in. I guess they're pretty confident in their exit polls. Any comments on what we've got going on so far?
Not really that surprised, seeing how this is going to be a year for the GOP. They picked it up, so yeah, not surprised.
And Tom Cotton, he's a pretty strong Republican. Yeah. Something interesting too was New Hampshire results. We were talking about earlier how that's going to be interesting. Right. In the first district, congressional district, with 18.6 reporting, Shea Porter and Gwinta are pretty neck and neck there. But in the second district, it's kind of surprising actually that Ann Custer, with only 11.7 reporting, so who knows where that's coming from, she's leading 60.4% to 39.6% to Marlinda Garcia. And the governor in the governor's election there too as well, the Democrat is leading in New Hampshire. So we'll see what happens there as the rest of those votes come in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And taking a look back quickly at the North Carolina Senate race, if I can pull that up here. That is 30% reporting, 52% for Hagan, 45% for Tillis. The vote margin is about 60,000. Again, only 30% reporting. And in Georgia, it's interesting. Purdue is holding above 60%. We're now up to about 13% reporting in that state. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And like we said, just to recap, in West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capito has won, and in Arkansas, Tom Cotton has won for the 2 GOP pickups so far this evening. So now we're going to take a look at congressional results again. It's holding steady at 27%. Connolly has 54% of the vote in Congressional District 11, and Suzanne Scholte has 43% of the vote for about a 5,000 vote margin. They still haven't called the race in the 10th District for Barbara Comstock, but she is hovering around 60% right now. So we should be seeing a call in that race soon. So any thoughts? I know we mentioned that the appeal by Chris to Florida was denied. So they will not be extending voting hours. They actually closed earlier.
Was there another state
in North
Carolina?
North
Carolina.
Yeah.
Have we heard from them yet?
No, I haven't seen anything on that. I just searched.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what the court says there, because those counties that they were trying to extend are heavy Democrat counties. So moving along now, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to return with our student body president, Phil Abrascato. Keep it tuned here to live election coverage at Student Media 2014. Welcome back to Student Media's live election night coverage. I'm joined here with our student body president, Phil Abrascato. Phil, nice to have you.
Thanks, Storm. Good to be here.
So we're going to talk a little bit about campus politics. So, what drives student voters. In this election, we had, I would approximate, I don't have an exact count, between 11 and 14% turnout to our university polling place. Obviously, that polling place was something that was a student government initiative, and now with this low turnout, do you think it's something that we are risking, being taken away?
It's that polling precinct has had a very interesting story to it. Before the precinct existed, student government actually had a voter van initiative where they basically worked to get students out to vote, and have them have rides to be able to vote. And then eventually we worked on an initiative to make a precinct here on campus. And right before the 2012 presidential election, they were talking about potentially moving it because from the year before the turnout was so low. And I think again it's just the nature of the game. What are people going to turn out for? Are they going to turn out for just another Senate election, or are they going to turn out for a presidential election? Because I'm sure you'll see, 2 years from now, you're going to see a big difference in the amount of students who are voting, big difference from what we have today.
Absolutely, and that's why it's something that's so vital that it's not taken away.
Yeah.
Because if we're looking for student participation here in the voting procedure, if you move that off campus, you're only dramatically decreasing the amount of student participation.
And that's why when we initially in 2012, when we did an exit polling through student government, and we asked students, is this polling place convenient for you? And the vast majority, of course, said yes. And then we had some meetings after, and we used that data to say, hey, we need this is something that's vital. This is something that students use, and it's something that's good for our Mason community. So, and thankfully, it's persisted and it's continued. And I'd like to hopefully, will continue regardless of what we see in numbers. So.
Should we have some sort of initiative, especially with the poor turnout this election, some sort of initiative to get a better turnout? Because it's kind of our responsibility to have that turnout so we show them, yes, our students are active. We do need to keep this precinct.
Yeah, and I think we've done some great things. Student media has done an awesome job with Mason Votes over the years, and as I've seen the initiatives and the really just the drive behind encouraging people to register to vote. I'm sure you couldn't walk outside of campus a month ago without someone asking you, oh, hi, have you registered to vote yet? So I think the registration is a big piece, and I also think the education of the issues of the candidates. Last night we had an event that we co-sponsored with called First of All We Vote, which we've been doing it the past couple of years, where it's a debate between the college Republicans and the GMU Democrats. And there was a good turnout. It was right in the middle of the JC atrium, and it's a great opportunity to educate. So I think between the education piece and the voter registration piece, there's a big drive there that we all can harness. Be it our whatever our affiliation may be it for department or organization, to really encourage students to learn who they're voting for and then actually go vote for them.
Why do you think students' participation, especially in this midterm, if it is around 14% turnout in this precinct, why do you think it's so low? Do you think they just don't, they aren't educated on the candidates, or?
It's difficult to say. I'm a government major, so most of the people I see, and you're a government major as well, we talk about this stuff. We live, breathe, and eat it. And some students, I guess they feel that like the average American who doesn't vote. What's in it for me? Why do I need to vote? Why does my vote even count? The countless questions that you continuously hear of why voter turnout ends up being so low throughout the entire population, not just college campuses in particular. But I think college campuses are an interesting thing to look at in terms of, well, what does this mean for when all of us are in our 30s and 40s and 50s? Who's going to continue to have that mentality of my vote doesn't count? And when do you change that mentality? Can you change that mentality?
It's only perpetuating.
Exactly. So and I think the environment that we're in, there's a lot of potential to teach someone, as a student, that hey, what you're doing actually matters. when you go out to Merton Hall and you register and you actually cast your ballot. So I think that the more people we can touch, in terms of how this is, how important it is, the better. Then once they graduate and they go beyond Mason, the more engaged citizens they will be.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, I think education is one of the, just voter education in general is one of the larger things. What you're talking about, not seeing, where this is going to affect us down the road, and I think it puts you almost in a difficult place, of trying to decide, what's maybe the best, or what can student government do to make sure that you're educated about your government in general, especially when you have the candidates, actually coming here to talk. So, but it's a hard question, but I still have to ask, what else do you think we could be doing?
Yeah, and I feel like, as a senior now, every year's been different. And, I've seen 4, you too, it's been 4 different types of election cycles that we've seen. We've seen a presidential election, we've seen a gubernatorial election, we've seen a Senate race, and each one I feel like has had a different dynamic between the groups that represent those major parties, between how, student government handles it, how student media handles it.
Right.
And, I think that we all can work together to find where's that common thread between, regardless of what the election is, that we can work to say this is a standard that we need to set as major players who have an ability to influence different students in this university. And so where does the standard need to be set in order to do more to engage these students, to engage the entire student body to see why voting is important and what we can be doing. So.
Right. I think it comes back to the idea at the end of the day that the student leaders on this campus and those who are really involved in government majors and stuff like that need to encourage participation. They need to encourage students to go out and vote and be involved in the process. It's not something that like you said and like we've talked about previously on the show, perpetuating this youth not millennials not voting is not going to do us any good. We're supposed to be the generation that's going to change this country. So I think at the end of the day, it comes back to us doing shows like this and going out to Merton Hall and encouraging people to vote on the day of and registering and stuff. I think that all plays into it in the education piece as well. Hopefully George Mason in the past has been a very active political campus, especially presidential election years. That's when you're going to see the height of it. But I think during these off years, we should, attempt to really, spur a conversation on campus. And like that event did last night, the First of All We Vote event, I heard a lot of students saying that actually got me to think about, how this affects, it affects you at the end of the day. It affects you.
And I think it's also important, to take advantage of what is it, us millennials, what do we do? We do Facebook, we do social media. I don't know if you guys saw today the voting.
I voted on Facebook.
I think
amazing.
that's genius. And it's because I can only imagine how many people actually ended up participating in that. And
you were saying 6,000 every minute at the beginning of the day there.
Yeah, they had a counter underneath it too, and that was
crazy.
going up to millions.
Yeah, and that's stuff our generation likes to see. We like to either look at a screen or go to an event and look at someone arguing with each other.
Right.
Well, we also want to tell people we did something too.
Right. Exactly. So I think by using those avenues, interviewing people and having and really face-to-face interactions with people to tell them, to educate them at our level, as opposed to some random person who's from some representing the DNC or something, and just coming onto North Plaza and being like, hey, have you registered to have you registered to vote yet? And it's different when it's coming from a student, and it's different from a student organization like yours or mine, where we're
one that doesn't maybe inflict as much bias too,
and when we're just here to educate, we're just here to ensure that everyone's aware of what's going on, and that the issues, especially as a student at an institution of higher education, like how could you not want to vote? be it a presidential election or a race for Senate.
Right.
We're at a point in our lives now where when we're voting, the people are put into the office, the more and more decisions they make, the more and more they matter to us.
Right. Yeah.
And it'd be better for our generation to hopefully learn that sooner rather than later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Phil, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Sorry we couldn't have you on longer.
Oh, my pleasure.
But I look forward to student government continuing to hopefully keep that polling place on campus. I know that we'll definitely fight for that going forward. But keep it tuned here to Student Media's live election coverage. We'll be right back with some final updates and closing remarks. Welcome back to Student Media's live election coverage, brought to you by WGMU, 4th Estate, Mason Cable Network, and Mason Votes. Just a quick update. The Virginia Senate race is actually pretty interesting currently. Gillespie is holding approximately an 80,000 vote lead with 64% reporting. So we're starting to get to that area now where Northern Virginia is going to flood in. And surprisingly, Gillespie is outperforming in Loudoun County, where McAuliffe trounced last year. So it'll be very interesting to see. It's probably going to come down to the last 10% of the vote that's going to decide this. Around the rest of the country, you have the Georgia Senate race. He's still holding strong at 60%, David Perdue. That'll be interesting to see if that avoids a runoff. That's been something that's been coming for a while. And in North Carolina, Kay Hagan is ahead still by approximately 100,000 votes with a little bit less than 50% of the vote counted. Up in New Hampshire, Jean Shaheen is up 53 to 47%. It's about a 9,000 vote lead, only 23% reporting, and that 23% has been a heavily urban Democratic area in Congressional District 2, which those races are also interesting. Jumping back to Virginia, in Congressional District 11, Jerry Connolly is up 56% to 42. He's up about 7,000 votes now, still only 28% reporting. And in Congressional District 10, 50% reporting. Barbara Comstock is still hovering around that 60% mark. She should be called very soon in that race. Any other races that you guys wanted to highlight? I think that's...
I think the point you made about Loudoun County and the fact that Gillespie's leading right now, I think we're in for a long one tonight. And
it should be interesting, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think it... I mean, I'm an optimist when it comes to elections. I didn't think that he'd be running.
My prediction last night was that this was going to be the upset. There's a good chance of me being wrong still because there's a whole lot to be reported.
It's too early, but
if I predicted this one,
but Loudoun's definitely interesting. I think I'm going to stay up to see Kansas roll in.
And you should stay up with us.
Yeah, I think Kansas is going to be interesting.
Yeah, Kansas is tied currently with an 8-vote margin, 10% of the vote reporting. Both have 36,000 votes. So that's going to be another interesting race. Definitely, stay in tune with these races. They're going to go down to the wire. So now let's go around for some closing remarks real quick before the end of the show. Rohan?
Yeah, so when it comes to I want to talk about the senatorial race here in Virginia. I'm actually, as a liberal, I'm feeling a little scared right now because I thought Warner was going to be up by more. And this definitely, even if he still wins, this definitely shows how the GOP is having a big year this year, as everybody predicted, and it could be bigger than what people predicted, but hopefully Warner will win. And
what do you think the final count will be in the Senate?
I actually think the Republicans will take it. I'm not.
Well, we know that, but
I'm not going to give a number. I can't. But
okay.
I think I really have to echo Rohan here. I'm kind of shocked that Gillespie's been holding on this long, but like you said, Northern Virginia's still flooding in, so there's still time. And I think just looking into GMU's district, a lot of it, I'm disappointed with this turnout. I can't say I'm surprised, but
exactly.
I'm disappointed, and I think our conversation with Phil is very evident that I think it's going to take some more pushes by us in student media and those in student government to really bring people out. I think the presidential election will bring a lot more, but and I think it's kind of cool that Sarvis snuck in there a little higher than expected.
It's I mean, libertarianism is something that's prominent in this 18 to 22 age group currently.
Yeah, but he was on campus yesterday, so
Right.
I'm wondering,
Yeah.
you know, I'm wondering if that got anyone to thinking. But, you know, aside, I don't think we've seen any, you know, surprises here aside from Loudoun County. And as a Loudoun County, you know, native, I think it's definitely interesting. So I'm excited to see how this shapes out. I also agree with Rohan that, you know, Republicans are they're going to take it. I'm not going to throw out a number either, but.
Yes, first, for my closing remarks, I just want to say thank you to everybody who went to putting this whole thing together. We got camera guys over there. We got people in the control room back there. Thank you to everybody in Office of Student Media for putting this together. It's been really fun. I had a fun time with all of you hosts as well. And I do think it's pointing to the direction of the way the country's heading, the way the Republicans are taking the Senate tonight and are going to take the House. Again, I think it's a direction to what people really want and what they don't want. And we see that obviously here. I think the Gillespie one's going to be close late tonight, but just because we're ending here doesn't mean we're done tonight. We're going to be at WGMU starting at 9:15, and you'll be able to watch that on WGMUradio.com. But thanks again to everybody for everything. It's been really fun. I had a good time.
Absolutely. And just one last update, because some more numbers have come in the Virginia Senate race. Ed Gillespie is still ahead by about 70,000 votes, now up to 65% reporting. So it's going to come down to the wire. We'll see what happens. If in Northern Virginia Gillespie can float, and if he you know, performs well in Loudoun, I think that you can see a potential upset here. I'm not going to say, you know, there's obviously plenty of room for us to be wrong here with that one. New Hampshire, I think that once you start to see the more rural areas of New Hampshire report, you're going to see Scott Brown jump ahead there. North Carolina, I think, will go Democrat at this point. And it'll be interesting to see if in Georgia, David Perdue can hold on for those, you know, to avoid the runoff election at 50%. Currently still running at about 60%, which I think is pretty impressive in a three-way race. It's pretty impressive. Other than that, I'd like to echo John's sentiment and thank everyone that put tons of hard work to getting this to happen tonight. I'd like to thank especially the director of student media, Catherine, who works tirelessly to put on programs like this. It's a great opportunity for students to have their voices heard, and we've had a great time tonight analyzing these results and commenting on current political issues. Like John said, stay tuned. At 9:15, we'll be going live from WGMU studio to continue election coverage, and that will go until 11 p.m. this evening. I'm Storm Paglia.
I'm Rohan Ramesh.
I'm Alexa Rogers.
And I'm John Hill.
Thank you for tuning in to Student Media's live election coverage of the 2014 midterm elections. Have a great night.